Chapter 12:14. Time flies and the sea turns into mulberry fields. This waterway seemed familiar, like the way home. It was familiar yet strange. However, the blue sea and blue sky made the Empyrean fairy recall things from a long time ago. Thousands of years ago, she was a completely different person than she was now. She was in the prime of her life, the youngest daughter of the celestial emperor, the proud daughter of heaven. Her status was noble and she stood above millions of people. Countless people revered her. She was very arrogant and very few people could enter her eyes. However, when she was 20 years old, the power of Purine exploded. She was on the verge of death and was afraid. She had never experienced fear before, but this time she truly experienced the taste of fear. It was the taste of death. Any courage in the face of death would collapse completely. It was not worth mentioning. She realized that she was afraid of death. She was as weak as those people she looked down on. She was even slightly weaker. In fact, the Emperor of Heaven had discovered her 9 saint body since she was born. However, he kept quiet and did not tell anyone. Even the Empyrean fairy herself did not know. Since then, the Emperor of Heaven began to find a way to save his daughter's life. In fact, the power of pure yin could be like the body of pure yang. It could absorb the power of pure yang from different men and achieve the balance of yin and yang. However, how could the Empyrean fairy do such a thing with her status? Even if it was to survive, she would not take off her noble appearance. Of course, this path would not work. The Emperor of Heaven racked his brains and flipped through ancient books, trying to find a way to solve this problem from the long river of history. In the long river of history, there were other women with the 9 saint body. However, they either died at the age of 20 or became promiscuous women. They absorbed the power of pure yang from men and were like demons. The Emperor of Heaven's heart was dead. He almost lost all hope. However, his responsibility and love as a father made him not give up. He finally found a ray of hope, and that was to find a place with no yin energy. With his powerful martial arts, he could turn yin energy into yang energy and seize the good fortune of heaven and earth. He could fight for a ray of hope for the Empyrean fairy. At that time, the Empyrean fairy did not know about this. She went out to sea with her father without a care in the world. She thought that it was a vacation and was very happy. However, when she reached the gate of heaven, she realized that something was wrong, but by then it was too late. After traveling for several days, they could no longer see the shadow of the continent. They kept heading south as if they were about to reach the end of the world. After experiencing several storms, the storms of nature could not do anything to them. Yi Dingdang was unable to eat and had to rely on nutrient solutions to maintain her vitality. It was heartbreaking. Yan Qingyi stayed in the cabin all day and did not leave. She had too many expectations for this trip, but also a lot of hesitation. In the past, when she used the divination technique, she had never felt like this, and she had never heard that strange voice calling her. All these signs indicated that this trip was unusual. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, she did not know. Her divination technique was derived from her understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was a divine ability that descended from the heavens. Not to mention others, even she did not fully understand the mysteries behind it. The scenery was enchanting, but Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang were not in the mood to appreciate it. Seeing their daughter become thinner day by day, their hearts seemed to bleed. However, seeing their daughter's encouraging eyes was the only way to make up for it. Their daughter's strength gave them courage and supported them to move forward. Suddenly, the ship stopped and floated on the sea. Everyone walked out of the cabin and came to the deck, looking at each other. What's wrong? I don't know. Could it be that the ship broke down? In the cabin, Tang Zheng stared straight at the Empyrean fairy. She frowned deeply and looked at the endless sea through the glass, not saying a word. The others also came to the cabin and started asking questions. We lost our way. Tang Zheng explained. With such advanced technology, how could we lose our way? The others found it hard to believe. Only she knows the specific direction of the divine gate, but after all, it's been thousands of years. The sea now is quite different from 1,000 years ago. So we lost our way. Tang Zheng was helpless. He also did not expect to encounter such a problem. The Empyrean fairy had always been very confident. There was no need to doubt her strength. Who would have thought that she would actually lose her way? Everyone looked at the Empyrean fairy. Seeing that she was silent, they did not dare to ask and could only look into the distance helplessly. It was indeed difficult to determine the direction in the vast sea with no reference point and thousands of years apart. The Empyrean fairy was silent for a moment. Then she turned around and stared at everyone. I also don't know the direction. She had always been proud, but she could not even find the direction. She was truly ashamed. Tang Zheng's face darkened. The thing he was most worried about had happened. Now they were like a blind person. There were so many directions, but where should they go? But he did not complain. He suppressed the chaotic thoughts in his heart and said encouragingly, "You're the only one who has been to the divine gate. Choose a direction based on your feelings." The others could not hide their disappointment and looked at her in unison. The Empyrean fairy did not argue. She directly closed her eyes and activated her mysterious technique, as if she wanted to feel that familiar aura. After a long time, she suddenly opened her eyes and pointed in a direction. "Then let's go this way." This was the direction she pointed out based on her intuition. Whether it was correct or not, she did not know. She could only wait and see if the goddess of luck would descend upon them. That direction. Tang Zheng was treating a dead horse as a living horse, so he immediately agreed with Nine Heavens' profound maiden's words. The ship set sail again. With a whistle, it sailed into the distance. A few days later, a gust of wind blew over from somewhere. Yin Luyun, who was standing at the bow of the boat, subconsciously hugged his arms tightly. This journey had allowed the young master of the Yin family to experience a lot of elegance. He was extremely excited. He wished he could grow wings and fly to the divine gate as soon as possible. Why does the weather change so quickly? It was unbearably hot just a moment ago. Why does it feel like we're in a world of ice and snow now? It's so cold. Yin Luyun muttered. It's so cold. Fang Shishir just happened to walk onto the deck. She could not help but tighten her clothes. These two were not ordinary people. Usually it was difficult for them to feel cold or hot. But today's weather caused their reactions to be so strong. It was really strange. The two looked at each other and immediately realized that something was wrong. The sky is still sunny. Why is it so cold? Yin Luyun asked curiously. Fang Shishir also nodded. She leaned on the side of the ship and stretched her head out to look. She found that the sea was still blue and there was nothing strange. Woo! A long cry came from the distance. The two of them stood up in shock. They looked up and saw a large ship sailing in the distance. Strange, how come we didn't see this ship before? Yin Luyun had been on the deck the whole time. He just looked in this direction. In this vast sea, there was no end in sight. It was impossible for a large ship to come close before they found it. Yin Luyun rubbed his eyes. He wondered if he was not paying attention and was negligent. Fang Shishir stared at the large ship and suddenly exclaimed, look at that ship. Why does it look like an ancient ship? Yin Luyun was shocked. He muttered in his heart. How could there be an ancient ship sailing on the sea in this modern society? This kind of thankless and incomparably dangerous thing. No idiot would do it, right? He took a closer look and found that the approaching ship was in the shape of an ancient ship. It was completely made of solid wood. There were flags fluttering on the tall mast, and there seemed to be shadows flashing on the lookout platform on the mast. Yin Luyun smacked his lips and sighed, "It really is an ancient ship." Fang Shishir had already noticed that something was strange. She turned around and rushed into the cabin. After a while, the others came to the deck and stared at the large ship. The two ships were only 100 meters apart. They could even see the vicissitudes of history of the large ship. Especially the cannons on both sides of the large ship. They were definitely ancient objects. Everyone looked at each other. Shouldn't this kind of antique be displayed in a museum? Why did it come to the sea to sail? This ship is strange. Empyrean Fairy stared at the large ship and concluded. Everyone be careful. Act according to the situation. Tang Zheng reminded. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Everyone's nerves could not help but tense up. Woo! There was another high-pitched cry. Everyone finally recognized that it was the sound of a bugle horn. It was like the bugle horn blown in an ancient battlefield. The atmosphere instantly became gloomy. There was a chill in the air. Whoosh! A cold light flew out from the large ship. Ching! The cold light landed on their deck and it buzzed and trembled. Everyone's pupils shrank as they stared at the cold light. It was actually an arrow. The cold light flashed and flickered with a cold aura that made people tremble. This thing is strange. Yin Luyun said in amazement. Be careful. Tang Jing glanced at the big ship from the corner of his eyes, and suddenly discovered that dozens of cold lights soared into the sky, shooting towards the bow of their ship, so he shouted loudly. Everyone was already on high alert. Hearing Tang Jing's warning, they all reacted. The light of their weapons flashed and the sound of clanking rang out. These cold lights were actually arrows. Although it was not 10,000 arrows, their attack power was not to be underestimated. It could be seen from the bow of the ship. Enemy attack. Tang Jing roared and soared into the air, rushing towards the big ship. The two ships were only a few dozen meters apart, and under Tang Zheng's feet, it was as if he was walking on flat ground. He flew to the top of the big ship and looked down. Immediately, his eyes became round and almost popped out of their sockets. He shouted in disbelief, "Quickly come and see. The ship is too strange." Empyrean Fairy also flew up. The others did not have such powerful skills. They could only stand on their tiptoes and look up. Empyrean Fairy flew above the large ship. When she saw the scene on the ship, her reaction was similar to Tang Zheng's. Her face changed and she could not help but cry out in alarm, "How did it become like this?" Chapter 12:15. This ancient ship was covered in green algae and moss. The deck was slippery as if it were covered in a layer of mucus. Dozens of people in ragged clothes were standing on it. They looked up with empty eyes and stared at Tang Zheng and the Empyrean Fairy in the air. The Empyrean Fairy and Tang Zheng were shocked when they saw their eyes. There was nothing in their eye sockets. Their eyeballs had long since disappeared, leaving only empty eye sockets. Additionally, their heads and many other parts of their bodies revealed eerie white bones. Rotten flesh hung from many of them. Even from dozens of meters away, the sea breeze seemed to carry a fishy smell. It turned out that the ragged clothes were hiding such bodies. The two glanced at each other. Tang Zheng smacked his lips and said, "What are these?" "These are already dead, but for some reason they can still move freely," the Empyrean Fairy said thoughtfully. Tang Zheng immediately recalled the scene in the 100,000 Mountains. The eerie white bones crawled out of their graves and moved freely. Their attack power could not be underestimated and was a great threat. These dead things like the white bones seemed to be controlled by some kind of power. "This place is strange, so we must be careful," the Empyrean Fairy warned. "I'll go on the ship and see what's going on." Tang Zheng was about to dive down after saying this, but before he could do anything, a series of whooshes rang out and shot toward Tang Zheng and the Empyrean Fairy. The enemy had taken the initiative to attack. Tang Zheng snorted. "A bunch of dead things dare to provoke us? I'll let you see what a real arrow is." Buzz. The bowstring vibrated as the sunshot arrow flew out. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One arrow turned into 9 and shot down at lightning speed. Clang, clang. The enemy's arrows could not withstand a single blow and collapsed under the sunshot arrows. The shooting sun arrows instantly reached the deck and turned into streaks of cold light, shuttling between the enemies. The sound of bones being pierced rang out one after another. As long as someone was struck by the arrows, they would quickly fall to the ground and turn into pieces of bone. When the other enemies saw this, they scattered in all directions. But how could they escape the shooting sun arrows? In the blink of an eye they were caught up. With a few thuds they also fell to the ground in disorder. With the threat removed, Tang Zheng landed on the deck. He looked around and felt that the atmosphere was lifeless. A gust of cold wind blew, making him shudder. Tang Zheng had pure yang energy, so he was not afraid at all. He strode forward, and the deck under his feet creaked as if it would shatter at any moment. The Empyrean Fairy also landed. She frowned and said, "This ship is an antique. I don't know how many years ago it sank. But the key point is that it floated up again. There must be some kind of power controlling all of this," Tang Zheng said with certainty. The Empyrean Fairy also nodded, but she could not see any clues. The ship had already stopped. It was silent and there was no sign of life. Suddenly, a scream came from the distance. Tang Zheng was frightened and quickly looked over. He found that the scream came from his ship. He cursed inwardly, afraid that there was a problem. "Return to the ship," he shouted. With a tap of his feet, he flew back to his ship. The Empyrean Fairy followed him like a shadow. The two of them landed on the deck and saw a group of crew members standing on the deck, trembling as they looked in the direction of the ancient ship. "What's wrong?" Tang Zheng quickly asked. "This is the Sea of Death." A crew member was frightened and uneasy as he stammered. "Sea of Death." The others showed a doubtful expression. They were not familiar with this name. The Sea of Death is a legend that has been passed down among sailors. It is said that there is a mysterious sea above the vast sea. Once a ship enters this sea, it will lose its direction and eventually become lost in the Sea of Death. Both the ship and the people will continue to sail in the Sea of Death. There is no end and no way out. The crew member said intermittently. This ship is obviously a ship that has been lost in the Sea of Death since ancient times. It has been unable to find a way out and has been sailing in this sea over and over again. This is a curse. Moreover, it is said that after a person dies in the Sea of Death, their soul will not be reincarnated and will be imprisoned here forever. This is the cruelest punishment. Tang Zheng's head trembled as he recalled the scene he just saw. Perhaps the souls of the dead really did not reincarnate, which was why the sea had accumulated so much yin qi. Seeing the crew members' pale faces, Tang Zheng asked curiously, "Then have you heard of how the Sea of Death was formed?" The crew members looked at each other and shook their heads. "We only heard it from the older generation of crew members. We don't know the specifics of the Sea of Death." Fang Shishir said worriedly, "We entered the Sea of Death. Could it be that we will be trapped in this sea forever and can't get out?" Tang Zheng's face was gloomy as he said without thinking, "So what if it is the Sea of Death? We have more people and more power. Could it be that we are afraid of a sea?" Although the Empyrean fairy's face was solemn, she did not despair. She comforted them, "Everyone, don't worry. I will definitely take you out." They were sailing in the direction she had pointed out. Therefore, she had an unshirkable responsibility for entering the Sea of Death. Of course, she would not shirk her responsibility. She took it without hesitation. "Quickly look. What is that?" Feng Xinyang suddenly pointed into the distance and shouted. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound, only to hear a loud rumble. A colossal object rose from the bottom of the sea, breaking through the waves and floating to the surface of the sea. Many people were dumbfounded, unable to calm down. This behemoth was a huge battleship. It looked like a modern battleship. Its mighty appearance was like a ferocious beast entrenched in the sea, breaking out from the depths of the sea. The bow of the battleship fiercely slammed into the surface of the sea, creating a wave that was several feet high. Then, the battleship turned around and fiercely charged towards the ancient ship. Following a loud sound, the ancient ship was broken into two by the battleship and quickly sank to the bottom of the sea. Hiss. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. This battleship's style made them tremble. It was majestic like the king of the sea. They subconsciously looked at the ship under their feet and found that compared to the battleship, they were as weak as a baby. They would definitely not be able to withstand the impact of the battleship. "Turn the rudder," the captain shouted. The crew members seemed to have woken up from a dream and hurriedly turned the rudder to escape the battleship's rout. Everyone on the deck was in a mess and screams could be heard everywhere. "Don't panic," Tang Jing shouted. He seemed to calm everyone down. However, facing the fear of the unknown, this group of crew members did not know the details of Tang Zheng and the others. Naturally, they were terrified. They were in a mess and did not listen to Tang Zheng's words. Yin Luyun stood out and shouted, "Don't panic. Everyone calm down. You are all members of the Yin family. Are you all so cowardly and afraid of death?" Swish. All the crew members calmed down. Yin Luyun's words were clearly more intimidating than Tang Zheng's. After all, these people were all members of the Yin family and recognized Yin Luyun more. Yin Luyun's aura surged as he said in a stern voice, "The Sea of Death may be useful to others, but it is definitely useless to us. Everyone calm down and listen to my orders. I guarantee that you will be able to return home safe and sound. Yin Luyun will always be with you." Seeing that even the young master of the Yin family was with them, they were mostly insignificant people. What was there to be afraid of? Thinking to this point, the fear in the hearts of the crew members gradually dissipated. They finally calmed down. Seeing the battleship rushing over, they no longer had the fear from before. Yin Luyun took a deep breath. He was also a bit panicked, but he believed in Tang Zheng's strength. Although the current situation was strange, Tang Zheng definitely had a way to get through it. This was a kind of unreserved trust. "Young Master Tang, you take command," Yin Luyun said. Tang Zheng nodded and said, "Let's avoid the battleship first. Then we'll board the battleship to investigate the situation." "Yes." The captain gave the order and continued to turn the rudder, successfully avoiding the battleship. The battleship broke through the sea with a crash and rushed past the ship's previous position. The huge waves it set off seemed to be displaying its might. If they didn't manage to turn the rudder in time, they would definitely be broken in two by the battleship and follow in the footsteps of the ancient ship. The battleship's attack missed. An angry roar rang out from the battleship. The battleship suddenly turned and charged forward. With a loud bang, the cannonball on the warship was fired. A pitch-black cannonball whizzed over and smashed into the sea on the side of the ship, setting off a huge wave that was dozens of meters high. It fiercely slammed onto the deck, drenching many people like drowned rats. Tang Zheng's eyes trembled as he roared, "The cannons on the battleship can still be used. Everyone be careful." He was truly puzzled. The battleship had floated up from the bottom of the sea and had been submerged in the sea for who knew how many years. How could it still fire? None of this could be explained by science, so there was no need to waste his brain cells to investigate. Ping ping ping. After the first attack missed, another series of cannonballs whistled through the air. The captain personally steered the ship and continuously dodged. He was in danger after danger and was almost hit several times. We can't go on like this. I'll go to the battleship. Tang Jing flew into the air. With a swoosh, the shooting sun arrow was fired at one of the cannonballs. With a boom, the cannonball was struck, but there was no smell of gunpowder. Instead, there was a plume of black smoke that flew out from the exploding cannonball. In energy. Tang Jing recognized at a glance that the black smoke produced by the explosion of the cannonball was Yin energy. Tang Jing directly rushed through the Yin energy without any abnormalities and arrived above the battleship in an instant. At the same time, the Empyrean Ferry also took action. The mountain river map rose into the air and floated above everyone's heads. An invisible force shrouded the incoming cannonballs and blocked them. They fell into the sea nearby and splashed up huge waves, but no one was hurt. Chapter 12:16. Tang Jing floated in the air, looking down at the battleship below. It was clear as day. There were hundreds of soldiers standing on the battleship. They were wearing tattered military uniforms, and it was impossible to tell which country they were from. They were the same as the people on the ancient ship from before. All of them had turned into rotten flesh and bones. They were gloomy and their empty eye sockets were all staring at Tang Jing. One of them, who looked like an officer, let out a mournful roar. The commander's blade in his hand pointed at Tang Jing, as if he was giving an order. Immediately, the people on the deck screamed. The mournful sound waves soared into the sky. It was especially ear-piercing, causing people to tremble in fear. Tang Jing snorted in disdain. A group of dead things, how dare you be noisy in front of me? Break. Whiz. Tang Jing swooped down like a cannonball and fiercely pierced into the deck. A few people jumped up and tried to attack Tang Jing. Bang. Tang Jing landed on the ground and ruthlessly stepped on these people's bodies, causing them to immediately shatter and scatter all over the ground. Tang Jing crushed the soles of his feet, and a pile of white ashes sank deep into the deck. When the others saw this, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they roared fiercely and their empty eye sockets seemed to shoot out a dark light, which was extremely terrifying. Tang Jing did not mind. He held the shooting sun arrows and heaven-shocking bow in his hands and roared, "Go!" With a piercing sound, the shooting sun arrow turned into a ray of light and disappeared from the bowstring. Then it flew into the crowd like a clap of thunder. Immediately, one could only see people falling down one after another silently. A chilling murderous aura assaulted their faces. In an instant, the shooting sun arrows swept through a large area, and all of them turned into broken bones, with Tang Jing as the center, covering the ground. The commander hid behind the crowd and continued to clamor, which was especially ear-piercing. Tang Jing stared, locking onto the other party. He rushed over with large strides. The shooting sun arrow left his hand once again. The 9 arrows merged into one and quickly flew in one direction. Its speed was so fast that it could not be seen, and did not even leave behind an afterimage. With the shooting sun arrows leading the way, Tang Jing followed behind them as if there was no one around. As soon as the shooting sun arrows came into contact with the people in front of him, they fell to the ground and turned into pieces. The commander kept retreating as if he was also afraid. But it was too late. How could he escape the shooting sun arrows? The shooting sun arrows firmly enveloped him, making it impossible for him to retreat. There was no way out. In the next second, the shooting sun arrow was about to shoot into his head. However, the shooting sun arrow stopped right in front of his forehead, just a hair's breadth away from him. If it had moved a little bit further, it would have pierced right in, ending his life in an instant. Tang Jing came in front of him and grabbed his head. He had no room to resist and could only let Tang Jing do whatever he wanted. "Who are you?" Tang Jing roared in a low voice as he questioned. The other party looked at him with empty eye sockets and roared like an angry lion, but he didn't say a complete sentence. Tang Jing frowned. He felt a steady stream of Yin energy passing from the top of his head to his palm. It seemed to want to drill into his meridians, but it couldn't break through his defense and could only linger in his palm. "It seems that you don't have real intelligence. You're really a dead thing," Tang Jing said disappointedly. As soon as his voice fell, he let go of his hand. At the same time, with a bang, the head immediately exploded into a pile of powder. When the others saw that the commander had been killed, their angry voices almost became a tide, trying to drown out Tang Jing. Tang Jing smiled faintly and walked forward. With a point of his finger, the shooting sun arrows automatically flew up. It was as if they were his arms. They were telepathically connected and shuttled through the crowd. Not long after, Everyone fell to the deck. Not a single enemy could stand up. A gust of wind blew up from the surface of the sea, carrying with it the yin energy on the deck of the ship as it rose into the air and merged with the seawater. The battleship stopped. Tang Jing stood at the bow and looked at the people on his ship. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing that Tang Jing alone had swept away the enemies on the battleship, this showed that they weren't completely at a disadvantage. Of course, the ordinary crew deeply understood Tang Jing's strength. They couldn't help but secretly admire him. Good. A cheer sounded from the crew as if giving them courage. Thunderous cheers rose and fell one after another. Goyulu. A bubbling sound quietly sounded and fell into Tang Jing's ears. He quickly looked down and found that the sea seemed to be half boiling. Bubbles appeared one after another. The bubbles burst, releasing clouds of black gas, little by little rising into the air. A dense fog rose above the sea. The others also discovered this and cried out in alarm. What's going on? The sea was boiling. Even the experienced crew had never seen such a scene before. They were all shocked. Tang Jing leaped up and jumped back to his own ship from the battleship. He stood with everyone and asked, "Does everyone know what's going on?" No one answered. The Empyrean fairy also fell into silence. She stared blankly at the boiling sea with a strange expression. Tang Jing didn't disturb her. Instead, he comforted the others and asked them to calm down. They had seen Tang Jing's extraordinary ability and were very happy with his comfort. Their panic was relieved. The sea was boiling more and more violently. The bubbling sound seemed to come from the bottom of people's hearts. It was like the boiling of people's blood, giving people a very strange and uncomfortable feeling. Wah! The seawater automatically parted to two sides, opening up a huge fissure. It was so dark that it was impossible to see what was inside the fissure, but the fissure was like a monster opening its mouth, as if it wanted to swallow everything on the surface of the sea. Is there a demon beast? Tang Jing recalled his previous experience and couldn't help but think. How can it be a demon beast? The inner demon's voice sounded. This sea is a bit strange. I can't see through it. In my time, everyone was on the continent. Very few people would go to the sea. Therefore, I know nothing about the Sea of Death. But there is one thing. The yin qi in the Sea of Death is too strong. I don't know how many people have died here. Hearing the inner demons refuting the judgment of the demon beast but couldn't see through it, their mood couldn't help but become heavier. Even with the inner demon's knowledge and cultivation, they couldn't see through this sea. This place was really strange. The crack on the sea became bigger and bigger. It was like the sea opening its mouth to swallow the world. The water flowed into the crack like a waterfall. It was unknown how high it was. The battleship followed the water flow and flowed into the crack. With a loud bang, the battleship fell into the crack. Only the sound of cracking could be heard. Everyone guessed that this steel battleship had probably been smashed into smithereens, broken into pieces. The steel battleship that could ride the wind and break the waves couldn't withstand a single blow from this power. Humans were especially small. Back off. There was no need for Tang Jing's command. The captain had already issued a command. He turned on all the power and spared no effort to retreat. He only wanted to get as far away from the crack as possible. But the power of the water flow was too great. It was so great that even modern ships couldn't resist it. Even if they turned on all the power, there was no way to retreat. They could only watch as they got closer and closer to the crack. It wouldn't be long before they followed in the footsteps of the steel battleship and were smashed into pieces. Not to mention the people on the ship. Perhaps a few experts could come out unscathed, but the rest of the crew would be in danger. How could Tang Jing watch these people die? He was the one who brought them here. He had the obligation and responsibility to bring them back safe and sound. He was just about to open Sumeru World and take in all the crew members so that they could escape this disaster. But then he saw the Empyrean fairy suddenly raise her head. As if waking up from a dream, her eyes lit up. She stared at the crack and shouted, "Don't act rashly." Tang Jing unconsciously stopped his movements and curiously looked at her and asked, "What's wrong?" The Empyrean fairy muttered to herself, "This feeling is becoming more and more familiar." She stared fixedly at the crack in the flowing water. She had never seen such a scene before, but there was a mysterious familiarity in her heart. It was very strange. But she was willing to take the risk and trust her intuition. Thus she stopped Tang Jing. Everyone looked at her curiously, wondering what new discovery she had made. They quietly waited for her to continue, but there was no explanation. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths again. Tang Jing couldn't help but ask, "How do you feel?" The Empyrean fairy didn't say anything else. She just stared at the crack with her eyes fixed on it. Tang Jing had no choice but to take action. But due to his trust in the Empyrean fairy, he suppressed this impulse. But as they approached the crack, the atmosphere became particularly somber. Everyone's breathing became heavy. On the verge of death, everyone's reactions were completely different. Some were crying, some were laughing, and some were throwing tantrums. But those close to Tang Jing didn't have much of a reaction. They only looked at Tang Jing. As long as he gave the order, they would act accordingly. They trusted Tang Jing completely. Among them, Yan Qingyi's expression was the calmest. There wasn't even the slightest ripple. Although she wasn't as powerful as the others, her conviction was incomparably firm. Few people could compare to her. In her prophecy, she had seen these people standing in front of the giant divine gate. Thus, she was fearless and believed that the crisis before them couldn't completely defeat them. The ship had been pulled to the edge of the crack. The rumbling water flowed down, striking the souls over and over again. Many people were trembling from the depths of their souls. Tang Jing was also a little anxious. After all, if he didn't take action now, it would really be too late. But the Empyrean fairy's determined look made him not dare to act rashly. He was deeply afraid of disrupting her plan. But she was so mysterious and didn't explain clearly. It was hard to guess what was true and what was false. This feeling was really uncomfortable. Okay, then I choose to believe you. I hope you won't disappoint me, Tang Jing said. He simply gave up on counterattacking and stared at the Empyrean fairy. The Empyrean fairy looked at the crack in the water, her eyes brightening. Chapter 12:17. Seeing that the ship had reached the edge of the chasm and was about to fall into the bottomless chasm, many people's faces turned pale. The courage and composure that they had just regained were all gone. Tang Jing took a deep breath and finally couldn't help but shout, "Fu Yao!" Amidst his shout, the others tightly gripped the ship's railing and gritted their teeth. Their eyes couldn't help but reveal a look of despair. The Empyrean fairy remained motionless like a statue. Her eyes emitted a dazzling light like resplendent stars, so bright that no one dared to look directly at them. Suddenly, her cherry lips parted slightly and the corners of her mouth blossomed with pleasant surprise. She shouted, "Don't be impatient, we're saved." As if to fulfill her words, with a rumble, a huge wave surged out from the crevice shrouded in dense mist. It was dozens of meters tall and seemed to have erupted from the bottom of the sea. The seawater flowed backwards, counteracting the force of the downwards flow. The ship immediately came to a stop. Under everyone's watchful eyes, something floated up from the crevice. In front of this thing, the battleship from before was like a tiny dot. This was a towering mountain rising from the bottom of the sea, with the seawater parting on its own. The crowd stared fixedly at this scene and gasped. The battleship was already shocking enough, but this mountain rising from the bottom of the sea made them unable to find any words to describe it. What is this? Question marks appeared in their minds one after another, but no one could answer. Tang Jing's eyes were also filled with suspicion and shock. This sudden change made him unable to guess what was going to happen, and it was impossible for him to predict what was going to happen. But when he saw the Empyrean fairy's reaction, he couldn't help but ask, "Empyrean fairy, do you recognize this mountain?" A mountain peak floating on the surface of the sea was already extraordinary, but the 9 heavens profound maiden seemed to be very excited, as if she knew this mountain peak, causing Tang Jing to mutter to himself. The Empyrean fairy looked straight ahead and said, "Of course I know it, this is the destination we've been looking for." Destination? Tang Jing was suspicious. A light flashed through his mind. "You mean the gate of heaven?" The Empyrean fairy smiled and nodded slightly. "Of course, other than the Elysium, what else is there?" Elysium? Tang Jing looked up, but he didn't see the door that Yan Qingyi had drawn. He only saw towering mountains that seemed to reach into the clouds. "This is the gate of heaven." The Empyrean fairy pointed at the mountain and jumped from the deck to the mountain. The mountain was verdant and lush. It was hard to believe that it actually floated up from the bottom of the sea. The others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Yan Qingyi walked up to Tang Jing and said, "What are you waiting for?" As if waking up from a dream, Tang Jing hurriedly turned around and returned to the cabin. He picked up Yi Ding Dang and glanced at the others. "We'll go up the mountain. The crew will stay." "Is there no danger?" The crew members were trembling with fear. Seeing the Empyrean fairy walk up the mountain without looking back, Tang Jing said thoughtfully, "Everyone, don't worry. There won't be any danger. The crack has already been filled up by the mountain and the water flow has stabilized." The crew members didn't refute. They just looked at the others in shock. Tianlei and the others naturally wouldn't stay on the ship. They all jumped off the ship. Yan Qingyi didn't know martial arts. Yan Luyun brought her up the mountain and the group chased after the Empyrean Fairy. The Empyrean Fairy walked for a while before stopping. She looked up at the towering mountain. The others caught up with her and asked curiously, "The gate of heaven is in this mountain. Why is it so different from what you've seen before?" From the Empyrean Fairy's reaction, they could tell that she had never seen the Sea of Death before. That meant that it was very different from the last time she came to the gate of heaven. That was why Tang Jing asked this question. The Empyrean Fairy said in a deep voice, "When I saw this mountain, I understood everything. The reason why I didn't see the Sea of Death when I saw the gate of heaven was because the Sea of Death was created by the gate of heaven." Is that so? Everyone's hearts trembled. They couldn't believe it. The world changes. Anything can happen. The gate of heaven is a place of absolute yin. Over time, this area of the sea has been affected and turned into the Sea of Death. Any ship that passes by will be imprisoned in the Sea of Death. It's difficult to escape. This is the danger of a place of absolute yin. The Empyrean Fairy explained without stopping. Everyone fell into deep thought. They gradually understood. If a place of absolute yin is so dangerous, what will we encounter? Fang Shishir asked curiously. The Empyrean Fairy glanced at her and said, "Things have changed. We didn't encounter too much danger back then, but it's hard to say now." Everyone's heart sank. It seemed that this trip would really be dangerous. If the Sea of Death could be created, this mountain would definitely have unknown dangers. "Everyone be careful. I'll be at the front. If there's any movement, I'll definitely warn everyone," the Empyrean Fairy said dutifully as she walked at the front. "Follow closely. Don't fall behind," Tang Jing reminded. He carried Yi Dingdang and walked forward. He was half a body's length behind the Empyrean Fairy. His eyes were on the 6 directions and his ears were on the alert. Boom! A loud sound rang out. The ground beneath their feet shook violently. Everyone stopped in their tracks at the same time and looked around. The loud sound rang out again. It was like the sound of footsteps. It came from afar and approached, shaking everyone's hearts. "What is it?" Yan Luyun cried out in alarm, but his face was flushed red, and his heart was excited. This was a combination of fear and excitement. He wanted to come out on an adventure to see the new world and new things. But when he heard those loud sounds, his blood seemed to be trembling. The Empyrean Fairy gazed at a nearby mountain peak with a burning gaze. Suddenly her eyes lit up. She tapped the ground lightly with the tip of her foot and flew out like a bolt of lightning. Boom! Another loud sound rang out as a gigantic creature walked out from behind the mountain peak and entered everyone's line of sight. A giant. This word immediately popped up in everyone's minds. However, Tang Jing had a different idea in his heart. This giant was not made of flesh and blood, but a stone giant. Its entire body was made of stone, and it was over 100 meters tall. In front of it, humans were insignificant, extremely tiny. A stone turning into a human didn't give everyone too much of a shock. It was just that the giant's body was somewhat intimidating. There was no doubt that the Empyrean Fairy had never seen this stone giant before. It must have been born later. Looking at its huge body, its combat power couldn't be underestimated. The Fairy of the 9 Heavens rushed forward fearlessly. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale flew out from her hand and suspended in midair. A gust of wind swept out from the painting and wrapped around the giant. Boom! The giant staggered a few steps. The tall trees around it were trampled under its feet and turned into debris. The giant waved its fist and tore through the gust of wind. It rushed out of the encirclement. It raised its head and opened its mouth as if it was roaring silently at the mountain river map. The Empyrean maiden frowned when she saw that her attack had failed to injure her opponent. She cast another spell, and a huge stream of water gushed out from the painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale. It was as if the water of the Milky Way was pouring down on the giant's head. Under the impact of so many water droplets, the giant bent down and supported itself with its hands on the ground, resisting with difficulty. Bang! Finally, the giant couldn't bear it and fell on its knees, creating a large pit. Smoke and dust rose and the ground trembled. The Empyrean Fairy said with a stern expression, "How dare you stir up trouble in the divine gate left behind by my father? If I don't kill you, I'm not the Emperor of Heaven's daughter." Swoosh! The mountain river map shone brightly and once again, something glittering with cold light fell. Ice blades. Everyone saw it clearly. The mountain river map was all-encompassing and its attacks were endless. The ice blades hit the giant's body and left white marks. The giant couldn't even raise its head. This storm-like continuous attack made the giant unable to resist at all. When the others saw the Empyrean fairy's true strength, they were shocked. Yen Liyun smacked his lips and exclaimed, "This is an expert." This subverted his understanding once again. He was already considered experienced and knowledgeable, but what he saw and heard this time opened the door to a new world in front of him. Don't worry, the giant is no match for the Empyrean fairy. Tang Zheng's eyesight was better than others, so of course he understood everything. As soon as he finished speaking, the giant was completely prostrated on the ground. He no longer had the strength to resist. He hung his head dejectedly and stared at the fairy of the 9 heavens and the painting of mountains and rivers. The Empyrean fairy landed and stood in front of the giant. Her body was as small as an ant, and the giant was like an elephant. However, the giant submitted at her feet and didn't dare to act rashly. "What are you?" the Empyrean fairy asked with an ashen face. The giant opened its mouth but no sound came out. "So it's just a useless thing." The Empyrean fairy shook her head and said regretfully. The others also caught up and looked at the giant at close range. One could imagine the shock in their hearts. "What do we do now?" Tang Jing asked. The Empyrean fairy looked behind the mountain peak and said, "There must be more dangerous things behind. Just be careful. As for this thing..." The Empyrean fairy pondered for a moment, then rushed out with a swoosh and hit the giant's chest with her fist. The thin fist was insignificant compared to the giant's body, but the power that burst out of the fist was enough to split mountains. There was a loud bang, and from the center of the giant's heart, cracks quickly spread in all directions, covering the giant's entire body in an instant. Kacha! The giant shattered, turning into giant rocks that scattered all over the ground. It no longer had the awe-inspiring aura it had before. The Empyrean fairy clapped her hands and walked through the rubble, heading deeper into the mountain. The others looked at each other, then came to and followed her. The air was filled with an austere aura, as if there was an invisible pressure pressing down on everyone's hearts. Even their breathing became heavy. Looking at the unfathomable mountain and the endless dense forest, no one had any confidence in their hearts. They didn't know what was waiting for them. Chapter 12:18. After walking for some distance, both sides were quiet. Other than the sound of their footsteps, there was no other sound. It was a dead silence that made one's hair stand on end. They went around the towering mountain peak and came to the depths of the mountain. The Empyrean maiden stopped in her tracks and so did the others. They all looked up and stared ahead with burning eyes. A huge stone door stood in front of them. "Heaven's Gate," Tang Jing subconsciously shouted. He couldn't help but remember what the 5-clawed golden dragon said before. The Heaven's Gate was a secret place of the Fu clan. It was said that it hid a huge secret and countless treasures. If he could enter the Heaven's Gate and obtain these, he could become the new Emperor of Heaven. Besides, Ji Wuxiang also had bad intentions towards the Heaven's Gate. The Heaven's Gate was a place of absolute Yin, and it was also the Fu clan's hunting ground. The fact that the Empyrean fairy was willing to share it showed that she was open-minded. Now that he had the chance to enter the Heaven's Gate, other than saving Yi Dingdang, he could also see the wonders of the Heaven's Gate. Of course, he never expected to be able to see through the secrets of the Heaven's Gate and become the new Emperor of Heaven. The others stared at the Heaven's Gate and sighed in amazement. "Is this the Heaven's Gate? It's so majestic, so extraordinary." The Empyrean fairy's eyes also became passionate. All kinds of emotions surged in her heart. Too many memories appeared in the depths of her mind like a movie. She had been pampered since she was young and lived a carefree life. Her father brought her across the ocean to the Heaven's Gate. When she saw the Heaven's Gate, she was shocked and asked what it was. The Emperor of Heaven didn't answer her. He only brought her through the giant door. What happened next completely overturned her worldview, causing her to be imprisoned here for over 1,000 years. After traveling through time and space for over 1,000 years, she escaped and left Heaven's Gate. However, when she returned to the continent, everything changed. The Celestial Emperor disappeared and became a legend. In addition, she had also heard rumors about the Heaven's Gate. It was said that the Heaven's Gate was a secret place of the Fu clan, and once one found the Heaven's Gate, he could become the new Emperor of Heaven. After the Empyrean fairy recovered from her shock, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At the same time, she also understood the Emperor of Heaven's painstaking efforts. The Emperor of Heaven imprisoned her not to harm her, but to save her. The Emperor of Heaven had used his great divine ability to fuse the pure Yin energy in the Gate of Heaven with the pure Yin energy in her body. In the end, he had reached the realm of extreme Yin, giving birth to Yang, thus pulling her back from the gates of hell. When the Emperor of Heaven imprisoned her and left her alone in the gate of heaven, she was filled with despair and anger. She hated the Emperor of Heaven to the bone. After that, she finally understood the Emperor of Heaven's good intentions after thousands of years had passed. Since then, her personality had changed greatly. She was no longer unruly and arrogant. She had even become humble and kind. This was a quality that she absolutely did not have in the past. Since then, she had never stepped into the gate of heaven again. She was completely unaware of all these changes. Revisiting this place, all sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. For a moment she didn't know what to say. Looking at her strange expression, Tang Jing asked, "What's wrong with you?" The Empyrean fairy came back to her senses and shook her head. "It's nothing. Along the way we haven't encountered any other dangers. This means that there isn't any danger. There shouldn't be any danger in the gate of heaven either," Tang Jing said thoughtfully. The Empyrean fairy was slightly startled. She hesitantly said, Perhaps. She couldn't give a definite answer. When he revisited his old haunts, he found that everything had changed drastically. In the past, the gate of heaven floated in the sea like an immortal mountain island. Now, it had sunk to the bottom of the sea, causing this part of the sea to become the Sea of Death. All these changes made it impossible for her to figure out the specific changes and current situation of the gate of heaven. Tang Jing opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. His heart gradually sank. The Empyrean fairy couldn't determine the changes in the gate of heaven. Didn't that mean that there was a possibility that changes had also occurred in the land of Absolute Yin, which delayed the rescue of Yi Dingdang? He lowered his head and looked at Yi Dingdang's eyes. There was a glimmer of hope in them. Yi Dingdang also didn't want to die. She wanted to continue staying by Tang Jing's side. Especially after seeing the gate of heaven, her survival instincts became even stronger. "Dingdang, I will definitely cure you so that you can always stay by my side." Tang Jing secretly gritted his teeth and silently made up his mind. Yan Qingyi looked at the gate of heaven with an excited expression. She subconsciously wanted to reach out and touch the gate of heaven. She muttered to herself, it's this scene. This was the scene she had foreseen. However, the voice that guided her did not appear in her mind. Therefore, in addition to her excitement, there was also a trace of regret and melancholy in her expression. "Come, let's go in." The Empyrean fairy took the lead and walked to the front of the gate of heaven. She stretched out her finger and a drop of bright red blood spurted out from her fingertip. Her finger slowly approached the gate of heaven. Finally, the tip of her finger came into close contact with the gate of heaven. With the tip of her finger as a dot, the blood quickly spread in all directions. It was like veins, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the entire gate of heaven. The gate of heaven glowed with a red light. It was like a rosy cloud, enveloping the surroundings of the gate of heaven. Everyone was stunned. They all widened their eyes and stared at this scene. Tang Jing's hand that was hugging Yi Dingdang tightened involuntarily. He looked at the red light excitedly. He suddenly realized why the 5-clawed golden dragon said that the Fu clan was required to open the gate of heaven. It turned out that the Fu clan's bloodline was required. This drop of the Empyrean fairy's blood contained the power of the Fu clan's bloodline inheritance. It was the key to opening the gate of heaven. This was a restriction set by the Emperor of Heaven, Fuxi. No one else could break it. The capillary-like thin lines completely covered the gate of heaven. The gate of heaven seemed to come alive. It moved backwards bit by bit. With a rumbling sound, a crack appeared in the gate of heaven. The gate of heaven opened. The crack became bigger and bigger. There was no light behind the gate of heaven. Instead, it was darkness. The deep darkness was filled with a terrifying power that could take one's soul away. No one dared to look inside. It was as if they looked, their eyeballs would sink into it and they would not be able to pull themselves out. Everyone became more and more excited. They did not even dare to blink as they stared at the gate of heaven. The Empyrean fairy continued to cast her spell. The meridians on the gate of heaven completely released their power. The gate of heaven slowly opened. After a few minutes, the gate of heaven opened completely. The darkness rushed towards them as if it was going to swallow the gate of heaven and earth. Everyone looked away with difficulty. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. The Empyrean fairy stopped casting her spell. She pointed to the back of the gate of heaven and said, "This is the back of the gate of heaven. To save her, we must enter the gate of heaven. The purine energy here will be the purest. It will be the best for nourishing her body and soul and rejuvenating her vitality." Tang Jing nodded. He carried Yi Dingdang and strode in without hesitation. Chapter 12:19. The darkness behind the divine gate was so dark that they could not even see their own fingers, but it was not a problem for them. The Empyrean fairy pointed her finger at the void, and a ball of primordial fire rose from her fingertip and floated in mid-air, illuminating the surroundings. Everyone widened their eyes and turned their heads to look, only to find that the divine gate was unfathomably huge, and the fire could not illuminate the entire area. The divine gate has always been this huge, no need to make a fuss. The Empyrean fairy understood their thoughts and explained. Everyone nodded and put away their thoughts, and followed the Empyrean fairy into the depths of the divine gate. The darkness gave them a lot of psychological pressure, and some of them could not help but breathe heavily. The thumping of their footsteps in the spacious divine gate was particularly ear-piercing, adding to the invisible pressure. "How far is it?" Tang Jing asked. The Empyrean fairy did not turn her head and said, "Although the divine gate is a place of absolute Yin, but in terms of absorbing pure Yin energy to save people, the divine bed is the core of the divine gate. The pure Yin energy on it is rich enough so it can save twice the effort and increase the success rate." Divine bed? Tang Jing raised his voice in surprise. Yes, the divine bed is the core of the divine gate, and it gathers all the pure Yin energy in the divine gate. The Empyrean fairy added. Back then she had to absorb pure Yin energy to save herself, and this time she had to lie on the divine bed for hundreds and thousands of years. She had a deep understanding of the magical properties of the divine bed. Suddenly, a golden light flashed on Tang Jing's arm, and the five-clawed golden dragon's voice rang out. "It is said that the divine gate contains many treasures of the Fu clan, and once you obtain these items, you may become the new Emperor of Heaven, is that right?" Tang Jing was shocked by the five-clawed golden dragon's sudden question, but he forcibly suppressed his curiosity. After all, he was here to save people. The five-clawed golden dragon was different. The dragon clan had a strong interest in treasures, and now that he had come to the divine gate, he knew about the rumors of the divine gate, so he asked without hesitation. The five-clawed golden dragon was fearless. He didn't care if the Empyrean fairy turned hostile. As expected, the Empyrean fairy stopped in her tracks and turned around. She stared at Tang Jing's arm that was shining with a golden light and said with an unkind expression, "You're still thinking about the Elysium?" The five-clawed golden dragon did not deny it either. He said with a dignified face, "The gate of heaven is a legendary treasure land. I can peek into its mysteries. Of course, I won't miss such a good opportunity." Although these words were tactful, the meaning was very clear. It was really tempted. Of course, unless the treasure was extremely extraordinary, it would not really make a move. "Five-clawed golden dragon, don't be rude," Tang Jing scolded with an unkind expression. The five-clawed golden dragon was afraid of Tang Jing and did not dare to make a sound. The Empyrean fairy sneered and said meaningfully, "Five-clawed golden dragon, I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Although there are rumors outside that there are treasures hidden in the gate of heaven, I want to tell you the truth. The gate of heaven is only a place with no Yin energy. There are definitely no treasures like you said." When the Empyrean fairy woke up, she ran through almost every corner of the gate of heaven. If there were treasures, she would have found them long ago. How could anyone else have a chance to find them? As for the rumors outside, she did not know where they came from. In her opinion, they were all nonsense and extremely absurd. However, she was too lazy to explain. These people had coveted the gate of heaven for a long time and could not find it. Why waste her saliva to explain? Tang Jing's curiosity was aroused. He stared at the Empyrean fairy with a burning gaze, as if he wanted to distinguish the truth of her words. However, after looking for a long time, he could not see the reason. The five-clawed golden dragon's voice sounded in his mind. He snorted and said, "She's lying. She's deceiving everyone. Don't be fooled by her." Tang Jing did not express his opinion. The inner demon suddenly said, "This gate of heaven is indeed a good place. The purine energy is dense and is definitely stronger than the previous mountain with the life totem." Tang Jing suddenly had an idea and said, "Since the purine energy is so strong, then can't I also absorb the purine energy here and neutralize the pure yang energy?" Previously, Tang Jing's heart was tied to Yi Dingdang. When he heard about the miraculous gate of heaven, he did not think that he could absorb the purine energy. Now that success was in sight, he suddenly had this idea. "Hee hee, you're finally enlightened." The inner demons praised. Tang Jing was overjoyed. "Why didn't you remind me before? Last time I absorbed so much pure yang energy that my body almost exploded. With such a great opportunity to save my life, you actually didn't give me any advice." He was quite depressed. He had worried for nothing for so long. "You really think too simply." Is a place of extremine that easy to find? If it wasn't for the Empyrean fairy, where would we find a place of extremine? The inner demons retorted. Tang Zheng was suddenly startled. He realized that he had been too impatient and had wrongly blamed the inner demons. Moreover, absorbing purine energy in a place of extremine is not that simple. Do you think it's as easy as absorbing purine energy from other women? The inner demon's question caused Tang Zheng to fall into deep thought. Could it be that he had thought too simply? The inner demon seemed to have seen through his thoughts and added, "You really are thinking too simply. How can absorbing purine energy be that easy? You must rely on a medium." Medium? What is it? Tang Zheng's curiosity was completely aroused. The purine energy in this place of extremine was born from the creation of heaven and earth. If a person wanted to absorb the purine energy here, they must draw upon the yin and yang energy of heaven and earth to succeed. Draw upon the yin and yang energy? Tang Zheng was startled. Ding Dang wants to absorb the purine energy in the gate of heaven. Does she also need to draw upon the yin and yang energy? Of course. If not, how could she succeed? Then how can I draw upon the yin and yang energy? The inner demons kept him in suspense and said mysteriously, "Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. When the time is right, I will naturally tell you." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and thought that they were deliberately mystifying things. However, the inner demons deliberately kept him in suspense, so he didn't continue to ask. In short, the inner demons would tell him away. They wouldn't really let him come here for nothing. The Empyrean fairy saw that the five-clawed golden dragon was no longer talking, so she didn't say anything else. Just as she was about to turn around, she heard a gust of wind coming from the depths of the gate of heaven. She was startled and shouted, "Be careful." The others also noticed this and were on high alert. Tang Zheng raised the holy shield to protect Yi Dingdang in his arms, Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang protected Feng Shishir, and Yen Luyun protected Yen Qingyi. All of them stared at the darkness in front of them with burning eyes. Whoosh! A strong gust of wind blew as if something huge was flying towards them. Go! The Empyrean fairy pointed her finger at the void, and the true fire quickly flew out. It turned into a streak of fire and collided with the incoming enemy. Brr! A sharp roar rang out, and the true fire illuminated a huge silhouette. It was a demonic beast with huge wings and it looked like a bat. In this dark and gloomy environment, there were definitely no lack of yin creatures like bats. After being nourished by the purine energy for a long time, it had become like this. Tang Zheng's guess was not wrong. This was indeed an evolved bat demonic beast. Bats were social animals and there was definitely more than one of them. Tang Zheng suddenly realized this and reminded them loudly, "This is a bat demonic beast and I'm afraid there is more than one. Everyone be careful." He did not know the specific dangers of the bat demonic beast, so he could only remind them loudly. Bats were afraid of fire, but this bat demonic beast was not afraid of the true fire. It actually rushed towards the true fire. After colliding with the true fire quickly ignited it, and it turned into a ball of flame, dancing in the air, and its shrill cries resounded through the gate of heaven. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, a strong gust of wind blew in front of them, like a tornado sweeping out from the depths of the gate of heaven. The terrifying pressure made everyone unconsciously nervous. A large group of bat demonic beasts is coming. The Empyrean fairy shouted. She pointed her finger at the void, and the true fire appeared between her fingers, interweaving into a fire net in the air. Buff, buff, buff. The strong wind blew and extinguished many flames, but the power of the fire net was still not to be underestimated. Many bat demonic beasts crashed into the fire net and immediately turned into balls of flame, fleeing in all directions and screaming. However, there were too many bat demonic beasts, and the fire net was eventually broken through. In an instant, a dark mass of bat demonic beasts flew over, and a foul smell hit them, making it difficult to breathe. The Empyrean fairy stood in front of everyone and roared, "A group of beasts, how dare you occupy my gate of heaven? All of you die." As soon as she finished speaking, a ball of light flew from her hand and floated in the air. It was the stately painting. The stately painting suddenly rolled up like a bag with a big opening. The bat demonic beasts at the front were immediately sucked into the stately painting. Seeing this, the other bat demonic beasts retreated. However, it was too late. The fairy of the nine heavens was enraged. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale danced in the air, immediately sweeping up a large group of demonic bat beasts. Without a sound, these demonic bat beasts disappeared. The painting of mounts and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale was another world. Once one was sucked into it, one would be at the mercy of the Fairy of the Nine Heavens. There was a world of difference between the strength of these bat demons and the Fairy of the Nine Heavens, so they were easily sucked into the painting. Let's see where you can run to. The Empyrean Fairy's mind moved, and all the bat demonic beasts in the gate of heaven were sucked into the stately painting, and there was no longer a trace of mournful cries. When the others saw this scene, they all breathed a sigh of relief. The bat demonic beasts looked particularly scary, especially when there were so many of them. If it was an ordinary person, it would take a lot of effort to defeat so many. However, this was not a problem for the Empyrean Fairy. The Empyrean Fairy put away the stately painting and let the true fire soar into the sky to light up the path ahead. She said loudly and clearly, "Let's go. I want to see what else is occupying the gate of heaven." The gate of heaven was the place where she had lived for hundreds and thousands of years. It was also a relic left to her by the Emperor of Heaven. It was extremely important to her, and she would not allow others to touch it, especially a group of demonic beasts. Chapter 12:20. The sudden burst of light attracted everyone's attention. Under everyone's watchful eyes, they discovered that the light came from the pearls embedded in the dome. The soft light completely cooled this part of the world, leaving nothing to hide. Ah! Fang Shishir's pupils shrank as she instinctively cried out in alarm. The others also involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air, because as far as their eyes could see, an extremely frightening thing was entrenched not far away. It raised its head high and looked down at them condescendingly. Those two huge eyeballs were like two flickering lights, causing people to shudder. Snake. This was a huge snake. Its huge body was entrenched in front of them, and there was actually a horn on its forehead. Tang Jing had seen a similar monster in the 100,000 Mountains. It was a snake that evolved into a flood dragon. It was the easiest place to breed these things. Previously there was a bat monster, so it wasn't too strange to see a flood dragon. The Empyrean Fairy strolled towards the flood dragon with an unfriendly expression. She scolded, "Get down here." The flood dragon spat out its red tongue, its eyes revealing an ominous glint. It sized up the Empyrean Fairy from head to toe, as if it was evaluating her battle strength. "Get down from the heavenly bed. How dare a beast like you occupy the heavenly bed?" Heavenly bed? Everyone's pupils shrank as they looked down at the flood dragon's huge body. There was indeed the shape of a bed faintly discernible. Could that be the heavenly bed? The flood dragon was entrenched on the heavenly bed, absorbing the pure Yin energy on the heavenly bed. No wonder it transformed into a flood dragon. Inner demons, didn't you say that humans can't directly absorb pure Yin energy? It can only be done by using the power of Yin and Yang. Why can this thing? Tang Jing asked suspiciously. The inner demons clicked his tongue and said, "Humans are the spirit of all things, but they also have their limits. All things in the world have their own characteristics and advantages. Other creatures naturally have advantages that humans don't have. Do you understand?" Tang Jing seemed to understand but didn't. This is what it means for all living things to be equal. No one species can have all the advantages. That would be a great injustice, something that is impossible to happen, the inner demons patiently added. Tang Jing finally understood. No wonder there was an ancient saying that all living things were equal. This sentence contained the truth of the great Tao, but ordinary people would not be able to discover the mystery behind it. This flood dragon stayed in Heaven's Gate for a long time. Over time, it absorbed the purine energy and gained sentience. Then, it cultivated bit by bit until it finally reached its current level. Unfortunately, its good days have come to an end. The inner demons said. Looking at the Empyrean Fairy's angry look, Tang Jing also understood that the flood dragon's good days were over. The Empyrean Fairy rarely showed such anger. This bed must be very important to her, otherwise she would not have such a big reaction. The Empyrean Fairy tapped the ground with the tip of her foot and gracefully flew to the top of the flood dragon's head, aiming for the protruding horn. Whoosh! A puff of green smoke came out of the flood dragon's mouth and flew directly towards the Empyrean Fairy. It obviously realized the danger and fought back with all its might. Insignificant skill. The Fairy of the Nine Heavens didn't care. A gust of wind flew out from the painting of mountains and rivers and immediately wrapped around the green smoke. There was no doubt that the green smoke was highly toxic and couldn't come into contact with it. The green smoke was blown away and the Empyrean Fairy's kick landed on the flood dragon's head. Bang! The horn on the flood dragon's head flashed with a faint light and collided with the kick. The huge force sent the flood dragon flying off the bed and landing heavily on the ground far away before it stopped. Brr. The flood dragon roared angrily and swept its huge tail towards the Empyrean fairy's head. The Empyrean fairy landed on the bed and looked down at the sweeping tail. She frowned and growled, "Go away." Of course, the flood dragon would not go away by itself. Its huge tail continued to sweep down like rolling thunder with terrifying power. The fairy of the 9 heavens stood firmly on the celestial bed. With a thought, a rock as big as a mountain fell from the painting of mountains and rivers. Bang! The rock hit the flood dragon's huge tail and crushed it under the huge rock. The flood dragon kept struggling, trying to get out from under the huge rock. The fairy of the 9 heavens lightly tapped the ground and flew to the boulder. Immediately, blood flowed out from the cracks of the boulder as if she was struck by a tremendous force. The flood dragon had no way to get out. It kept shaking its body but to no avail. "How dare you occupy the gate of heaven with such little ability? You don't know what's good for you. I'll kill you first." The Empyrean fairy's words made the flood dragon feel real fear. It had gained intelligence and knew who was stronger and who was weaker. Through this fight, it knew that it was far from being a match for this person. It would be better to beg for mercy. The Empyrean fairy looked indifferent and did not care at all. A cold light appeared in her hand and she aimed at the flood dragon's vital point. Suddenly, a golden light rose from Tang Zheng's arm and flew directly above the flood dragon. The Empyrean fairy stopped attacking subconsciously and looked at the golden light in surprise. She asked, "What are you doing? You're going to kill it anyway. It's a pity. Why don't you give it to me?" The 5-clawed golden dragon's voice flew out from the golden light. In the golden light, the 5-clawed golden dragon's eyes were shining. He stared at the flood dragon and thought to himself, "God is really helping me. I've been imprisoned under the imperial city for hundreds of years and my cultivation has deteriorated too much. Now that I have this flood dragon, it can help me improve my cultivation and skills." The flood dragon and the dragon could not be compared. The dragon was a higher existence and was the direction that the flood dragon strived for. However, they had many things in common. Therefore, the 5-clawed golden dragon could use the flood dragon to improve its strength. "What do you want it to do?" the Empyrean fairy asked suspiciously. Tang Zheng also looked at the 5-clawed golden dragon curiously. He did not know what it was trying to do. The inner demons praised, "This 5-clawed golden dragon is a good opportunity. I can't believe it can have such a harvest in the gate of heaven." Obviously, the inner demons saw through the 5-clawed golden dragon's intention. Tang Zheng was just about to ask the inner demons when the 5-clawed golden dragon swooped down toward the flood dragon with a flash of light. The 5-clawed golden dragon's voice sounded, "Let's wait and see." The golden light wrapped around the flood dragon and made it tremble violently. Compared to the Empyrean fairy, the 5-clawed golden dragon's draconic aura made the flood dragon tremble and fear from its soul. This was an instinctive fear. It had a deeper understanding of the draconic aura. This was something it had always been pursuing and it knew how powerful it was. "Ow, ow, ow." A series of mournful screams did not change anything. The golden light turned into a huge dragon's head. The dragon opened its mouth and bit down on the flood dragon's head. The others could clearly see that the dragon's mouth was gradually swallowing the flood dragon. The flood dragon struggled even more violently. It was making its final struggle, but it still could not change anything. The outcome was already decided. The flood dragon disappeared into the dragon's mouth. Roar! The dragon's mouth let out a deafening dragon's roar that resounded through the gate of heaven. It made people's eardrums buzz and made many people feel frightened. Yan Luyun and Yan Qingyi opened their eyes wide at the same time and stared at this scene. This was completely beyond their understanding. Even though Yan Qingyi was always calm, her heart was surging with stormy waves. The dragon's head disappeared and turned into a mass of golden light. The golden light kept rolling like the clouds in the sky. It seemed to be brewing something. The Empyrean fairy turned her head to look at Tang Zheng and asked, "What's going on?" Tang Zheng only understood half of what was going on and could not explain the specific situation. He shook his head in confusion and said, "I don't know." The Empyrean fairy showed a disappointed expression. However, like the others, she still stared at the mass of changing golden light. She realized that all these changes were not simple. In a flash, the golden light changed again and gradually turned into a small golden dragon. It was shining and majestic. Its dragon's eyes emitted a golden light and it emitted a daunting draconic aura. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank as he stared at the dragon's claw. The Empyrean fairy looked at him and also stared at the dragon's claw. Why is there an extra dragon claw?" the Empyrean fairy muttered to herself. Tang Zheng cultivated the dragon god technique, so he knew what this meant. The 5-clawed golden dragon's strength and cultivation had increased. It had even grown a 6th dragon claw. From now on, it was no longer a 5-clawed golden dragon but a 6-clawed golden dragon. This flood dragon was actually so useful. No wonder it could not help but rush out. This was indeed a rare opportunity, like the inner demons had said. The 6-clawed golden dragon's eyes were full of smiles. This was something it had dreamed of, and now it had become a reality. It shook its head and wagged its tail, flying in a circle in the air. It was overjoyed and flew in front of Tang Zheng. Its dragon eyes stared straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng reached out and touched the dragon's head. The others saw this scene and sucked in a breath of cold air. This was more shocking than pulling a tooth out of a tiger's mouth. The key point was that the 6-clawed golden dragon did not show any signs of impatience. It was as docile as a kitten and did not have the domineering aura that dragons should have. Although the 6-clawed golden dragon's strength had increased, its soul brand was still there. Therefore, even if it was domineering, it still had to restrain itself. It did not dare to have a temper. "Congratulations," Tang Zheng said from the bottom of his heart. The 6-clawed golden dragon looked into his eyes and nodded. "Thank you." After saying this, it nodded towards the Empyrean fairy as a sign of gratitude. After all, if it was not for the Empyrean fairy bringing them to the gate of heaven, it would not have had this opportunity. The Empyrean fairy did not look sideways. She did not take this gratitude to heart. Yen Luyan smacked his lips. He wanted to ask if he could touch it, but seeing the 6-clawed golden dragon's arrogant appearance, he swallowed the words back down. The 6-clawed golden dragon looked around and swept its gaze across everyone. Other than Fang Shishir and the Empyrean fairy, everyone else felt a tremor from the depths of their souls. "Let's go back." Tang Zheng did not want to let everyone feel too much pressure and said to the 6-clawed golden dragon. The 6-clawed golden dragon blinked its eyes as if it was wronged. It wanted to say that it had just increased its strength and that it should show off for a while. However, after seeing Tang Zheng's expression, it obediently returned to Tang Zheng's arm and turned into a tattoo with an additional dragon claw. Chapter 12:21. The pure Yin energy caused Tang Zheng's emotions to surge as he stared at the sky bed with shining eyes. The Empyrean fairy noticed Tang Zheng's strange behavior and said, "The sky bed is where the pure Yin energy gathers in heaven's gate of extreme Yin. It contains an extremely strong amount of pure Yin energy. If you want to save her, you can only do it here." She sighed as she spoke. Back then she had relied on the sky bed to escape disaster. It was precisely because she had absorbed too much pure Yin energy that a lot of it was used up. However, it was still a lot, and normal people would not be able to handle it. "What method do you have?" The Empyrean fairy did not know how Tang Zheng was going to inject pure Yin energy into Yi Dingdong's body. There were two indispensable conditions for her to be able to absorb the pure Yin energy in the sky bed. First, she had the 9 Yin Saint body and was very sensitive to pure Yin energy. Her body also contained an extremely strong amount of pure Yin energy, so she could resonate with the pure Yin energy in the sky bed. Second, the Emperor of Heaven used a great technique to activate the pure Yin energy in the sky bed. Only then could she successfully absorb it. Neither of these conditions could be missing. Yi Dingdang did not have the same unique conditions and advantages as her. Therefore, the Empyrean fairy was very curious as to how Tang Zheng was going to do it. Tang Zheng did not know and could only ask the inner demons for a plan. The inner demons laughed. Before he could speak, Tang Zheng felt a wretched aura rush towards him. "Are you planning something bad?" Tang Zheng frowned and asked. The inner demons was indignant. "Am I that kind of person? I'm teaching you how to save someone. If you have such a dirty idea, then I won't say it." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and was too lazy to argue with him. He said crisply, "Hurry up and tell me. Don't keep me in suspense." The inner demons naturally did not dare to change their mind at the last minute. They said resentfully, "By connecting the power of Yin and Yang, and thus allowing the power of pure Yin to circulate between heaven and earth and the human body, it will naturally be easy to inject it into Yi Dingdong's body." "The key is, how do you activate the power of Yin and Yang?" Tang Zheng asked. "You've already figured out a way, so why don't you know it?" The inner demons asked. Tang Zheng was confused. When did he figure out a way? "Why do you say that?" "To connect Yin and Yang, you naturally need pure Yin energy and pure Yang energy to circulate and communicate. Only then can you succeed. Do you still not understand?" The inner demons asked implicitly. Tang Zheng widened his eyes and said bitterly, "Inner demons, don't keep me in suspense." The inner demons were slowly unraveling the mystery. What is the highest amount of purine energy you've absorbed? It's. Tang Jing hesitated for a moment. In the end, he did not say that difficult word. It was as if a bolt of lightning flashed through his heart and he quickly understood what the inner demons were referring to. The highest amount of purine energy that Tang Jing had absorbed was of course when he had sex with those women. At that time, yin and yang were in harmony and harmonized with each other. From there, the pure yin and yang energy would circulate and reach a state of harmony between yin and yang. Tang Jing gradually understood and asked with mixed feelings, "You're saying that I had sex with Ding Dang?" The inner demons chuckled, "You're not stupid. You don't respect yourself as an old man." Tang Jing was indignant. He had never thought that doing this could save lives. This was a bit of a fantasy. The inner demons retorted angrily, "You've urged me time and time again. When I told you the truth, you said that I don't respect myself as an old man. How preposterous." Tang Jing said embarrassedly, "Who would have thought that you would be referring to this method? But this is the only way. If you don't believe me, you can ask the Empyrean Fairy." Tang Jing naturally could not ask the Empyrean Fairy. After all, it was too difficult to ask. But from the fact that the Empyrean Fairy did not know the specific method, the Empyrean Fairy also did not know anything. Only the inner demons could have the final say. Seeing that Tang Jing was silent, the inner demon said helplessly, "Believe it or not, it's up to you." Tang Jing's mind was full of thoughts. Everyone looked at him with burning eyes. He was like a puppet, thinking without moving. At this time he was especially charming and refreshing. "Well, I'll believe you for now. If I find out that you're lying and can't save Ding Dang at all, I'll definitely not let you go." Tang Jing threatened without holding back. The inner demons was speechless. After a moment of silence, he indignantly retorted, "You're biting Lu Dongbin like a dog biting Lu Dongbin. You don't know how to appreciate good intentions." Just as his voice fell, he realized that his words seemed to be pointing at the mulberry tree and cursing the locust tree. It could be seen that Tang Jing was completely focused on Yi Ding Dang and did not bicker with him. He inwardly rejoiced and felt a lingering fear. Seeing that everyone was looking at him expectantly, Tang Jing coughed and said in a deep voice, "As far as I know, there is indeed a way to connect the yin and yang forces and inject the pure yin energy from the gate of heaven into Ding Dong's body. However, this method is not suitable for outsiders to know. So, everyone does not need to know the specific details. You just need to know that I can save Ding Dang." Seeing that Tang Jing was making a solemn vow and stuttering, it was obvious that there was a secret. Everyone's hearts were ignited with the flames of gossip. They stared at Tang Jing intently, hoping that he would reveal the secret. Tang Jing found it difficult to open his mouth. He did not know how to tell the truth. Moreover, the other party was Yi Ding Dang. If he said it openly, how could she face other people in the future? He took a deep breath and ignored everyone's eager eyes. He said calmly, "Everyone please leave. The rescue needs a quiet environment. No one can disturb us. I'll stay and help you. I'm very familiar with the gate of heaven. Maybe I can help you with twice the result with half the effort." The Empyrean Fairy volunteered. Tang Jing sighed and said to himself, "If you stay, how can I have a relationship with Ding Dang? I'm not the kind of person who likes to be exposed in public." So, he refused without changing his expression. "Thank you, but I don't need your help for the time being." Seeing that he repeatedly refused, everyone knew that he must have other secrets, but it was not convenient for him to express them. Everyone's curiosity was aroused, but there was nothing they could do. "All of you stay outside and guard. You must not let anyone come in and disturb us. Otherwise we will give up halfway. Our hard work and effort will be wasted." Tang Jing deliberately said it in a very serious manner to attract everyone's attention. Sure enough, when these words came out, many people's expressions became serious. Especially the Ye family and Fang Shishir. These two parties had a close relationship with Yi Ding Dang, so of course they did not dare to lower their guard. Yi Tianlei took a step forward and patted his chest as he promised, "Don't worry with me here unless they step over my dead body, no one can even think of taking half a step into the mine." Chapter 12:22. The Empyrean Fairy stared deeply at Tang Jing. In the end, she did not ask any questions and left with the others. Tang Jing casually waved his hand, causing the sacred armor shield to fly out. It rapidly enlarged and became like a door blocking the entrance. Tang Jing gently placed Yi Ding Dang on the heavenly bed and a wave of pure yin energy emanated from the heavenly bed, revolving around her endlessly. It was just that the pure yin energy could only linger around her body and was unable to enter her body. All of this was invisible to the naked eye but could be clearly felt. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank as he stared at the bed and Yi Dingdang. He asked, "Inner demons, it can't be that simple to activate the yin and yang energy, right? Just sex? You're getting smarter and smarter. You even guessed it. Of course it can't be that simple. It must be accompanied by a corresponding mental cultivation method to succeed." The inner demons were slightly surprised. They could not help but think highly of Tang Zheng. "Then quickly tell me the mental cultivation method," Tang Zheng urged. As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light flashed in Tang Zheng's mind and a shining mental cultivation method appeared. This mental cultivation method was like a stream of water that quickly merged into Tang Zheng's mind and could not be removed. "You should leave for now." Tang Zheng sealed the inner demons. Before the inner demons could say a word, they lost consciousness and could not see the outside world. Tang Zheng also laid down on the sky bed. The sky bed was ice cold and refreshing. Pure yin energy immediately lingered around his body, but it was still unable to merge into his body. Yi Dingdang lay on the bed with her eyes wide open. She looked at Yi Dingdang suspiciously. She did not know how he was going to save her by sending the others away. "Dingdang, to save someone you must activate the yin and yang energy. The only way to activate the yin and yang energy is..." Tang Zheng hesitated, not knowing how to start. Yi Dingdang blinked her eyes, clearly using her eyes to encourage him. Tang Zheng took a deep breath, deeply encouraged, and said truthfully, "I have to have a relationship with you in order to be able to trigger the yin and yang energy, and then help you absorb the pure yin energy. In addition, I can also absorb the pure yin energy during this process, and thus help me to balance the pure yang energy in my body." Yi Dingdang's eyes were filled with joy. It was said that not only could she save herself, but she could also save Tang Zheng. It was the best of both worlds. Although she didn't say a word, Tang Zheng understood what she meant and let out a long sigh of relief. Dingdang relaxed completely. "The others can't see. It'll be fine in a while. After that, you'll be back to normal." Tang Zheng comforted her. Yi Dingdang mustered all her strength and answered softly. As if he was greatly encouraged, Tang Zheng's fingers fell on her chest and gently undid the buttons. After a while, Yi Dingdang was completely naked in front of him. It was as if a stone had been thrown into a lake, causing ripples to appear on the surface of the lake. Tang Zheng's breathing couldn't help but quicken. He pressed down on her, his broad chest pressing down on her body. They could clearly feel each other's heartbeat quicken, especially Yi Dingdang. Her heartbeat was originally very weak, but at this moment, it was like she had been injected with a cardiac stimulant. The two of them looked at each other and a deep love was communicated through their eyes. The heart sutras were silently activated in their hearts. When the two of them became one, the pure yin energy circling around their bodies began to ripple. Like a whale sucking in water, the pure yin energy entered Tang Zheng's body from the point of connection. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up. As he moved, he silently felt the pure yin energy. This pure yin energy was much more powerful and pure than the pure yin energy he had absorbed before. It was naturally very beneficial to him. The pure yang energy that had been restless in his body seemed to have smelled something, and all of them moved out, entangling with the pure yin energy. The two energies harmonized with each other, and the restless pure yang energy was immediately appeased. There was too much pure yin energy, so much so that Tang Zheng couldn't completely digest it. The excess pure yin energy once again flowed back out of Tang Zheng's body and then quickly gathered in Yi Dingdang's body. Her body was originally like a dry field. The pure yin energy was like rain. With the pure yin energy's nourishment, it was like a field that had been nourished by rain. It immediately burst forth with life. Tang Zheng could clearly feel that her life force was slowly recovering. He was delighted and hurriedly activated his heart sutras. The pure yin energy quickly flowed from his body to Yi Dingdang's body. Yi Dingdang opened her eyes wide in comfort. Her eyes regained their vitality as she looked at Tang Zheng with mixed feelings. As Tang Zheng's movements increased, she couldn't help but let out a soul-stirring sound. This space was immediately filled with an ambiguous atmosphere, causing people to be extremely shy. Yi Dingdang was immersed in it. She didn't care about being shy and completely enjoyed this wonderful process. There was no need to mention how delightful it was. The pure yin energy in the sky bed endlessly flowed into the two's bodies. Their erect bodies revealed the beauty of yang, while their slightly arched waists revealed the beauty of yin. The combination of hardness and softness indicated the harmony of yin and yang. This was the power of yin and yang, the great Tao of relations between heaven and earth. Outside the sacred armor shield, a group of people anxiously looked around but couldn't see anything. They anxiously paced back and forth. Feng Xinyang looked at Yi Tianlei, who was pacing back and forth. She impatiently waved her hand and scolded, "Tianlei, don't randomly walk around. You're making me dizzy." Yi Tianlei subconsciously stopped his footsteps. He sighed and said, "Aren't I anxious? Aren't I anxious?" Yi Tianlei was speechless. Feng Shishir advised, "Tang Zheng is very confident. Ding Dang is blessed by the heavens and will definitely get better." The two of them looked at her deeply and said, "Definitely." Empyrean Fairy wished that she could see through the sacred armor shield and see how Tang Zheng was able to use the power of yin and yang to allow Yi Ding Dang to freely absorb the pure yin energy. Even she couldn't think of a way. It was hard for her to imagine that such a method really existed in this world. However, she knew her priorities, so she wouldn't rashly rush in and ruin Tang Zheng's plan. Yan Luyun and Yan Qingyi also stared at the sacred armor shield. Yan Luyun couldn't suppress his curiosity and whispered, "Aunt, do you know how young Master Tang did it?" Yan Qingyi regretfully shook her head. "How could I know? Didn't you predict this?" Yan Luyun asked. Yan Qingyi rolled her eyes at him and didn't answer this question. Prophecy wasn't omnipotent. How could she know everything? Moreover, she wasn't worried about this problem. She was worried about something else. Before she came here, she vaguely felt a mysterious calling. However, ever since she stepped into the gate of heaven, this feeling disappeared without a trace. No matter how she tried to sense it, she couldn't find any clues. This was undoubtedly a huge setback. She had come all the way here to unravel the mystery. Why was it that when she arrived at her destination, there was nothing? Chapter 12:23. His gaze was as sharp as a knife as he looked into the distance, as if he wanted to pierce through the darkness. The Empyrean Fairy's brows furrowed. She had already heard the movement. Although the other party's voice was very soft, it still did not escape her ears. When the others saw this movement, they all jumped in fright and quickly turned their heads to look into the darkness. However, their strength was far from the Empyrean Fairies, so they did not discover anything strange. "What's wrong?" Feng Shishir asked. The Empyrean Fairy said in a deep voice, "Someone's coming." "Could it be that stone giant again?" Yan Luyun said in shock. "No." The Empyrean Fairy immediately denied and shook her head. "The other party has already entered the gate of heaven. The stone giant is too big, so there's no way for it to enter the gate of heaven." Yan Luyun nodded resentfully and asked suspiciously, "Then who could it be? Could it be those people who died in the Sea of Death?" No one answered because they were also not sure. They all looked at the Empyrean Fairy, who was also hesitant. Who is it? Won't we know after testing it out?" Feng Xinyang was in a hurry. In order to ensure her daughter's safety, she rushed out without a care for her own safety. She was determined to investigate the situation. She was like a whirlwind as she rushed into the darkness. A light suddenly appeared, and with a cry of alarm, a person flew out from the darkness. This scene attracted everyone's attention, especially the person who flew out. "Feng Xinyang!" Yi Tianlei cried out in alarm. He jumped up like a cannonball and caught Feng Xinyang. In just one exchange, Feng Xinyang was actually defeated. She flew back with a pale face. It was obvious that she had suffered a loss in the dark. The others stared in front of them in shock. It was so dangerous in the dark. Feng Xinyang was not a match for it. One had to know that Feng Xinyang was someone who had barely touched the edge of the Grandmaster realm. Ever since their fates had been tied together with Tang Zheng's, Tang Zheng had spared no effort in helping them on their path of cultivation, causing their cultivation to soar, far surpassing their normal cultivation speed. Yi Tianlei was slightly weaker than Feng Xinyang, so when he saw that she was not on the same level as him, he immediately understood the danger. But when he saw his wife's pale face, he felt like he was about to spit out a mouthful of anger. Feng Xinyang saw through his thoughts and quickly grabbed his sleeve. She advised, we have to protect this door and not let the bad guys take half a step into the minefield. This is the most important thing." Yi Tianlei felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He immediately calmed down. Unwilling to accept this, he glared fiercely at the darkness. "You're saying that there really are people in the dark?" Empyrean Fairy did not act blindly without thinking. The enemy's situation was unclear. For the sake of the big picture, it was better to clarify things first. Feng Xinyang said weakly, "Yes, and it's a martial artist." No one doubted her judgment. This was information that she had almost exchanged with her life, so it could not be false. Martial artist? Empyrean Fairy raised her eyebrows. How could there be a martial artist in this place? The gate of heaven was so mysterious that it was impossible for outsiders to find it. How could it be like a tail following them here? The others' expressions also became serious. Good people did not come, and those who came had ill intentions. The other party deliberately hid in the dark, so there must be a conspiracy. Did you predict this? Empyrean Fairy asked Yen Qingyi curiously. Yen Qingyi shook her head blankly. No, I only predicted the scene in the painting. I'll go check it out. Fang Shishir volunteered. Don't. Yi Tianlei and his wife stopped her at the same time. Everyone knew how important Fang Shishir was to Tang Zheng. Naturally, they would not let her take the risk. If something happened to her, then Tang Zheng would go crazy. Empyrean Fairy stepped forward and said, I'll meet them and see who they are. She could already confirm that the people who came were not from this island, but guests from the outside world who had just arrived. She knew a thing or two about the various powers in this world. Maybe the people in front of her were old acquaintances. Go. The Empyrean Fairy pointed her finger and a beam of light shot out from her hand. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale was suspended in mid-air. It shone brightly like a ball of light, dispelling the darkness and gradually revealing everything. Empyrean Fairy followed like a shadow and flew into the darkness with the mountain river map. The darkness could not cover her eyes. On the contrary, it made her eyes sharper and her mind more focused, not letting go of any clues. Suddenly, a scene appeared in her mind. There was a person in the darkness not far from her. She did not need to look at him at all as this person appeared clearly in her mind. Without any explanation, she moved her mind and a tornado flew out from the mountain river map and enveloped this person. Before the other party could make a sound, he was sent flying into the sky and hit the dome hard. With a thud, his head drooped and he fell limply to the ground, no longer breathing. In a few moves, she had eliminated an enemy. She did not let her guard down because she knew that the danger was not over yet. Instead, there was an even greater danger lurking in the darkness. The person who came was indeed a martial artist. At least, the person she eliminated was a martial artist. Moreover, his cultivation was not low at all. He was in the Grandmaster realm. In the past, the Grandmaster realm was the peak of cultivation in this world. But now, everything had changed. Grandmasters were gradually becoming more common. This was the change brought about by the advancement to a great world. Not only did it benefit cultivators, but even martial artists also benefited. Of course, it was a fool's dream for ordinary martial artists to advance to the Grandmaster realm. From this point of view, the enemy's vanguard was a Grandmaster martial artist, so the enemy hiding behind was more powerful. However, Empyrean Fairy was not afraid. Instead, she was somewhat angry. The divine gate was a gift left for her by the Emperor of Heaven, but it was trampled by these ungrateful people with evil intentions. This was a great disrespect. How could she just let it be? She walked step by step into the darkness with a frosty expression. Suddenly, 2 attacks came silently from the darkness. She did not blink or even turn her head. She pointed her finger lightly and 2 forces passed through the darkness. Puff puff. 2 flowers of blood bloomed in the darkness. 2 people fell to the ground. Empyrean Fairy did not show mercy. These people were sneaking around. They were enemies and not friends. She had never shown mercy to her enemies. One person in the darkness did not react. No one even whispered to each other. This was a team with strict organization and discipline. It made people shudder. Humph, if you don't show yourself, I'll kill all of you. Let's see how long you can hide. Empyrean Fairy snorted angrily. Suddenly, another person appeared in the darkness. He clearly appeared in her mind. She was about to do the same thing, but when she was about to get close to him, he disappeared. How could a person disappear? Moreover, he was within the range of her perception. This was too abnormal. She immediately realized that something was wrong. She was on full alert. The mountain river map flew down and tried to strengthen her defense. However, all of this had already happened. A hand silently appeared behind her and slapped towards her back. The fingers of the hand were slender and well-trimmed, like a woman's hand. They were sparkling and shiny. The Empyrean Fairy's hair stood on end. Even her hair was about to stand up. She didn't even turn around. Instead, she slapped her palms back from below her ribs at a very strange angle. Bang bang. There were 2 muffled sounds. Both of them stepped back at the same time. A strong force came from her palms and passed to every cell and every meridian. She clearly felt the shock of the power. Her pupils shrank slightly. She twisted her neck, trying to find the enemy in the darkness. However, the enemy seemed to be one with the darkness. Even her perception was ineffective. She frowned in dissatisfaction and muttered to herself, "Are you playing hide and seek with me?" This is the heavenly gate, my territory. You've chosen the wrong place. She could no longer hide the anger in her words. Her long hair and clothes fluttered in the absence of wind. She slowly rose into the air. The mountain river map cast a ray of light and enveloped her. In the darkness she was a ray of light. The darkness around her was quickly dispelled. More and more places were exposed to her vision. Mountain river map, shine on the earth. She gently opened her mouth and a clear voice like a sweet spring burst out. It resounded through divine gate and spread to every corner. Fang Shishir and the others watched this scene without blinking. The various methods displayed by the mysterious maiden of the 9 heavens could be said to be miraculous, causing people to yearn for and admire her. Whoosh! A ray of light bloomed from the mountain river map. In an instant, the mountain river map was like a scorching sun, shining on the earth and illuminating every corner. There was nowhere to hide. The 9 heavens maiden looked down at everything from above. Not a single clue could escape her fiery golden eyes. Her expression changed as she looked at the enemy who had exposed themselves in surprise. The others also widened their eyes and looked at the group of uninvited guests in surprise. There were 20 to 30 enemies. Each of them was vigorous and imposing. One could feel the powerful aura coming from them just by looking at them. These people were wearing masks. Their faces could not be seen clearly. They were silent, but they gave off a strange oppressive feeling. It was hard to breathe. Who are these people? Fang Shishir asked in surprise. She had never seen these people before, especially so many martial arts experts. They were like bamboo shoots after a rain, suddenly emerging from the soil. The others shook their heads, especially Yen Luyun and Yen Qingyi. They were descendants of aristocratic families and knew a lot of inside information. They understood what these martial arts experts meant. In the past, if a family had 1 or 2 of these experts, they would be able to stand tall. But now there were dozens of them. Could it be that martial arts experts could be mass-produced? No one knew the answer. Seeing the details in the darkness, they were full of questions. Empyrean Fairy could see more clearly. These dozens of people were at least martial arts masters. This made her daydream and even more puzzled. In today's world, it was very difficult to cultivate so many martial arts masters. Although she was not a martial artist, she knew a thing or two. Chapter 12:24. This group of people were all wearing masks, giving off a cold vibe. It was hard to see through them. Who are you? The Empyrean Fairy scolded. No one answered her. Pairs of eyes stared at her coldly through the masks. They glanced at the others. You don't want to answer? You can't hide. Let's see what you can do. The Empyrean Fairy snorted and activated her spell. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and Vale shone brightly like the sun, forcing people to close their eyes subconsciously. Kill? She ordered in her heart. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ice blades flew out from the stately painting. They flew above the heads of these people in an instant, as if they were going to pierce into their bodies in the next second. Bang, bang, bang. There was a series of explosions. The ice blades exploded and turned into ice shards. They had no attack power at all. This. The Empyrean Fairy's pupils constricted. She turned pale with fright. She was a spellcaster and could feel it the most. A formless energy flew out from these people at the same time, intercepting her ice blades. When did martial artists reach such a level of synchronized counterattack? The martial artist's eyes shone as if they were mocking the Empyrean Fairy. They were silently mocking and ridiculing her. What's going on? Yi Tianlei thought that this attack would definitely succeed. He did not expect this result. Moreover, he was a martial artist and could feel the reactions of these people very clearly. These people did not seem like martial artists anymore. Or rather, they were worlds apart from ordinary martial artists. Kill. The opponents shouted in unison. Their voices shook the surroundings. The sound waves converged into a long spear, which was thrown at the Empyrean Fairy. It was visible to the naked eye. This is a spell? Yi Tianlei was the first to exclaim. Impossible. These people are martial artists. How can they use spells? This completely overturned his understanding. The others were also dumbfounded by this scene. Although the Empyrean Fairy was shocked, she knew that she had encountered a powerful enemy. Moreover, it was very strange and bizarre. She could not afford to be distracted. She crossed her hands and spread out her 10 fingers, triggering the Purine energy in the divine gate. Although most of the Purine energy in the gate of heaven was gathered on the heavenly bed, the air was still filled with Purine energy. She had the 9 saint body. The Emperor of Heaven had once used his great power to allow her to freely communicate with the Purine power in the Elysium. Therefore she could draw on the Purine power. Purine energy converged like turbulent clouds, surging towards the mysterious spear from all directions. Boom! The walls of the cave trembled violently for a moment, and a lot of dust fell from the cave before the trembling stopped. Everyone took a closer look and was shocked to find that the spear had disappeared. Instead, Purine energy gathered and surged towards the enemy like a black cloud. Fang Shishir and the others were excited and secretly cheered. The Empyrean fairy was extraordinary. Although these enemies were mysterious and powerful, they might not be her match. However, they did not have time to be happy for long. These people were chanting something and a shocking syllable rang out. Ma. As soon as the syllable rang out, the momentum between heaven and earth seemed to solidify. The rolling Purine energy also paused like frozen water, maintaining the rolling posture. It was very strange. The Empyrean fairy was shocked. This syllable was very familiar. She stared at the enemy with shining eyes, as if she wanted to distinguish the person she suspected from the crowd. But these people were wearing masks and dressed the same, so there was no way to distinguish the target. She didn't just sit there and wait for her death. Instead, she shouted, "The renowned supremacy Ji Wuxiang is actually hiding in the shadows. When did you become a coward?" This syllable had exposed everything. This was the 6 words of the non-phase method. The Empyrean fairy had experienced the mystery of it and knew how powerful it was. However, as far as she knew, the non-phase method was Ji Wuxiang's special skill. It was a secret that was not passed on. How could he pass it on to so many people? Were these people his confidants? Were they the forces left behind by the flying guillotine? The flying guillotine disintegrated in the hands of Tang Zheng and disappeared. This time, the other party did not use the flying guillotine's special skill, so the Empyrean fairy could not make up her mind. But there was no doubt that the strength of these people was not inferior to the flying guillotine. With the help of the non-phase method, their strength was far beyond that of the flying guillotine. The non-phase method was used to deal with all the people with distracting thoughts and killing intent. They were all secular people, so it was inevitable that they would not be contaminated with this vulgar aura. Could it be that they were going to be defeated in the hands of Ji Wuxiang? Everyone's heart sank. They had an ominous premonition. The Empyrean fairy's momentum was vigorous. She did not accept her fate. Instead, her eyes burst out with a sharp gaze, staring at the enemy. Ji Wuxiang was one of them, but he had learned to be smart. He did not reveal any traces, making people unable to see through him. The trick of capturing the leader first to capture the bandits was no longer effective. "Ha, mysterious maiden of the 9 heavens, your provocation isn't brilliant at all. Do you think I'm that kind of inexperienced child who would fall for your provocation?" Ji Wuxiang's voice rang out, reverberating through the crowd, making it impossible for people to lock onto him. The Empyrean fairy remained calm and collected. Her eyes searched the crowd for a long time, but she did not find anything. "In fact, this time, thanks to you, I can find the legendary Gate of Heaven." Ji Wuxiang spoke again, taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. The Gate of Heaven is the most mysterious secret territory of the Fu clan. It hides great secrets and treasures. If you can see through the mystery, you will become the new generation of Emperor of Heaven. I will gladly accept this big gift." The Empyrean fairy's face darkened. She said, "Humph, wild ambition. But you will be disappointed. I don't know where you heard this false rumor, but it is too wrong. The Gate of Heaven is only an island. How can it be the secret territory of the Fu clan, not to mention the treasures and becoming the Emperor of Heaven? It is simply a bunch of nonsense." The Empyrean fairy's powerful rebuttal did not seem to be a lie. Ji Wuxiang hid in the crowd and stared at her with a pair of bright eyes, wanting to see through her appearance and see her true nature. "You think I will believe this kind of lie that can fool a 3-year-old child?" Ji Wuxiang's voice sounded again. "It is up to you whether you believe it or not. I am speaking the truth. If this is true, then why did you come to the Gate of Heaven?" Ji Wuxiang did not know that they were here to save Yi Dingdang. He thought that they were here to uncover the treasures and secrets of the Gate of Heaven. "Aha, you actually did not know what we were here for, and yet you chased after us. Your intelligence network is clearly not as efficient as you think it is," the Empyrean fairy said sarcastically. Without a doubt, the news must have been leaked. That was why Ji Wuxiang was like a cat that smelled blood and chased after them. Ji Wuxiang was not angry at all and said calmly, "No matter what you are here for, you have brought me to the Gate of Heaven. This is a great reward. You said that there is nothing in the Gate of Heaven and that everything is a false rumor. Why would I believe you? I only believe in my own eyes and judgment. Ji Wuxiang obviously did not give up. He looked at the sacred armor shield behind the Empyrean fairy and the others. His eyes flashed and greedily locked onto the sacred armor shield, wanting to see through it. You said that there is no treasure, then what is behind the sacred armor shield? You are not going to tell me that there is nothing, right? Ji Wuxiang seemed to have found a flaw and thought that he had hit the nail on the head. There is nothing in there that is useful to you. The Empyrean fairy said unhappily. The heavenly bed gathered too much purine energy. It was useless to Ji Wuxiang, so what she said was the truth. However, in Ji Wuxiang's eyes, this was an extremely laughable lie. Haha, whether it is useful to me or not is up to me to decide. It is not up to you, Ji Wuxiang said jokingly. He changed his tone and asked, Tang Jing has been with you all this time. Where did he go? Could it be that he is inside? That has nothing to do with you. It seems like I guessed correctly. I am really curious as to why Tang Jing went in and blocked you all outside. What is his goal? It seems like I have to go in and take a look. I cannot let him beat me to it. Hearing this, Yi Tianlei shouted, Ji Wuxiang, this is not the Azure Dragon Palace. How can you do whatever you want? If you want to go in, you will have to step over my dead body. Ji Wuxiang looked at Yi Tianlei with disdain and said, An insignificant unfilial son of the Ye family dares to be noisy in front of me. So what if I step over your dead body? It is not that difficult. Moreover, how can I be the one to clean up the family? Naturally, there will be someone to do it for me. As soon as he finished speaking, an angry roar sounded out like a thunderclap. Unfilial son, you have sided with the enemy and betrayed the Ye family. Today I will clean up the family. One person took off his mask and shouted, Yi Xuanji, father. One by one, their eyes widened as they looked at this person in disbelief. He was actually the head of the Ye family, Yi Xuanji. When did he join Ji Wuxiang? This discovery was explosive enough to shock everyone. After all, he was the head of the family, yet he had actually given himself to Ji Wuxiang. Suddenly, everyone remembered what Tang Jing had said. The Ye family was no longer the same as before. They no longer had the glory of the past and were instead controlled by Yi Meiyu. Even Yi Ku had betrayed Yi Xuanji and submitted to Yi Meiyu. There was nothing more to it than the betrayal of the family. Yi Xuanji was disheartened, and it was not impossible for him to submit to Ji Wuxiang. However, looking at Yi Xuanji's crazy and stubborn eyes, everyone realized that he had changed from before. The last bit of calmness and peace had disappeared, leaving behind only a vicious aura. Perhaps as long as it was a member of the Ye family, he would want to get rid of them as soon as possible. At this moment, Yi Xuanji's thoughts were indeed like this. He had fallen into the abyss of paranoia and was unable to extricate himself. He only remembered that Yi Tianlei had different opinions with him and left the Ye family, but he did not remember Yi Tianlei's contributions and what he had done to Yi Tianlei's family. Chapter 1225. Hearing Feng Xinyang's accusation, Yi Xuanji was so angry that his entire body trembled. He glared at her and shouted, Feng Xinyang, I shouldn't have agreed to let you marry into the Ye family. That's why this unfilial son listened to your instigation and betrayed the Ye family. You evil woman. This accusation did not anger Feng Xinyang in the slightest. Her nerves were thick and she had been tested for a long time. She had long been accustomed to these kinds of rumors, so she said disapprovingly, Tianlei is sensible, he knows who is better for him. You keep saying that you are good for him, but in reality you are doing it for your own benefit. You are simply the scum of your father. Since they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, she might as well be more thorough. Feng Xinyang's fiery personality exploded and did not leave him any face. Yi Xuanji's entire body trembled. His face turned red and green. When the others saw this scene, they could not help but admire. Perhaps only Feng Xinyang dared to go against Yi Xuanji so loudly. Yi Tianlei remained silent. His expression kept changing. On one side was his wife and on the other side was his father. He was sandwiched in the middle. One could imagine how he felt. His gaze swept across his wife and father's face. Finally, his expression became firm as he stared at Yi Xuanji. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate everything. It was so sharp that no one could look at him directly. Seeing this, Yi Xuanji's heart thumped. He had an ominous feeling. He had never seen Yi Tianlei look at him with such a gaze. It was sharp. You gave birth to me, but you have gone against me time and time again. I have nothing to say about this. But you insulted my wife. As her husband, I cannot tolerate it. What I, Yi Tianlei, owe you, I will return it all to you and the Ye family. From today onwards, I, Yi Tianlei, will no longer have anything to do with the Ye family. Yi Tianlei's tone was firm, making others feel respect. Yi Xuanji was furious. He wanted to shout again, but he saw Feng Xinyang's expression change. She reached out her hand to stop something, but it was too late. In a situation where no one expected, Yi Tianlei's hand flashed and a sharp blade appeared. He directly stabbed it into his own chest. Oh! The blade stabbed into his chest without any resistance. Blood flowed out from his chest. No! At this moment, Feng Xinyang cried out. But it was too late. Actually, when she heard her husband's firm words, she knew that he wanted to do something. But she was too late to stop him. Yi Tianlei was like a statue. He did not fall down, but his face had already turned pale from the pain. He looked at Yi Xuanji coldly as if he was looking at a stranger. From this moment on, the guilt in his heart flowed out of his body along with the blood. He had a clear conscience. The Ye family gave it to me. Today I will return it to the Ye family. Yi Tianlei took a deep breath and said with difficulty. Yi Xuanji was dumbfounded. He did not expect his son to have such an extreme action. He was so courageous. He looked at him blankly, not knowing what to do. Tianlei, why are you so stupid? Feng Xinyang held her husband. Her tears fell as she bitterly asked. Yi Tianlei's lips curled into a relieved smile. He weakly said, You've been with me for so many years. It's been hard on you. In order to not let you and Ding Dang be shrouded in the Ye family's shadow, I can only do this. I have a clear conscience. Stupid. You're really stupid. Feng Xinyang was already unable to say more. Because she understood her husband. Her heart ached for him. Tianlei, hold on. I will save you. She was very clear that the sharp blade had already pierced his chest. The situation was very critical. If she did not save him in time, she might lose her husband. But she was not good at medicine. She could only ask the Empyrean fairy for help. Please save him. The Empyrean fairy pointed at his chest and protected his heart. She protected his last bit of life. The blood immediately stopped. She took out a pill and said, Feed him. Feng Xinyang quickly took the pill. Ji Wuxiang's voice sounded at this time. Yi Xuanji, do you still want to watch the show? Yi Xuanji could not hold it in anymore and roared, I will clean up you unfilial descendants. He charged over. Feng Xinyang's hands were not empty. She could not stop him. Moreover, her cultivation was not small compared to Yi Xuanji's. Whoosh! A graceful figure appeared and stood in front of Feng Xinyang to protect her. Feng Shishir. She finally made her move. She was not used to seeing all this. Although she did not hate evil like Yi Ding Dang and had a fiery personality, she was still very righteous. She could not hold back her anger and charged towards Yi Xuanji. Yi Xuanji did not put Feng Shishir in his eyes at all. He snorted in disdain, Little girl, you don't know what's good for you. Then I'll fulfill your wish. He already had the intention to kill. With a flash of his sword, Yi Xuanji's sword had already arrived in front of Feng Shishir. His sword technique had absorbed a lot of the wind-chasing sword technique's essence. Although he could not fully grasp its essence, it was still very powerful. Feng Shishir had just broken through to the Golden Core realm not long ago. She was equivalent to a master-level martial artist. Yi Xuanji had trained hard for his entire life and was only a master-level martial artist. However, he did not know how powerful Feng Shishir was. He thought that he would definitely win. Feng Shishir would become a ghost under his sword. Feng Shishir stared at the cold light coming towards her. She moved lightly and silently dodged the attack. Yi Xuanji was shocked. He was surprised by Feng Shishir's reaction. However, he did not pay much attention to it. Subconsciously, he thought that it was just a coincidence. Feng Shishir was just too lucky. But in the next second he wanted to slap himself. Feng Shishir came to his back without leaving a trace. With a flash of light in her hand, she had already reached Yi Xuanji's back. Yi Xuanji's hair stood on end. He was shocked. Relying on his many years of battle experience, he quickly turned sideways and stabbed Feng Shishir with his sword. Feng Shishir did not have enough battle experience. She greatly underestimated Yi Xuanji's reaction. When she saw the sharp sword coming straight for her, she was already too late to react. The sharp sword pierced her body ruthlessly, but it only made a small cut on her clothes before it stopped. Yi Xuanji looked at this scene as if he had seen a ghost. No matter how much strength he used, the sword was unable to move forward. Could it be that her body is so strong that even my sword can't break through her defense? A huge question mark appeared in Yi Xuanji's mind. His brows instantly furrowed, and his expression became extremely complicated. Lowering her head to look at the sword in her chest, the corner of Feng Shishi's mouth curled up into a bitter smile. Luckily, she had the golden jade purple robe that Tang Jing gave her. Otherwise, her body would have definitely been pierced by this sword. She was so scared that she broke out in cold sweat. She had underestimated Yi Xuanji after all. The other party was the head of a family. After all, he was extraordinary and could not be underestimated. Chapter 1226. Feng Shishi counterattacked, a cold light flashed, and blood blossomed from Yi Xuanji's chest. He screamed and staggered back, clutching his chest. He looked at Feng Shishi in disbelief and stammered, You. He spat out a mouthful of blood and couldn't even complete a sentence. This attack caused him great damage. Feng Shishi originally didn't plan to be so heavy-handed, but after being attacked she subconsciously counterattacked, and naturally used all of her strength. Other than being injured, Yi Xuanji was even more agitated. He actually lost to Feng Shishi. This was a great humiliation. Yi Xuanji's defeat was due to him underestimating his opponent. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't even put Feng Shishi in his eyes, he wouldn't have lost so badly. Feng Xinyang looked at this scene, and her eyes were filled with splendor. In her and her husband's eyes, Yi Xuanji's strength was unfathomable, and they definitely didn't have the confidence to defeat him. However, Feng Xinyang wasn't afraid of anything. Even if the opponent was very strong, she wasn't afraid of him. Seeing Yi Xuanji lose, the wall that she had built up in her heart all this time suddenly collapsed. So Yi Xuanji wasn't undefeatable. Even a junior could defeat him. What did she have to worry about? It's useless. Ji Wuxiang's voice sounded again. Come back. 22A formless energy appeared out of nowhere and enveloped Yi Xuanji. Before Yi Xuanji could react, he was sent flying backwards and landed behind the crowd, avoiding further attacks. Go. I want to see what's behind that holy armor shield. Ji Wuxiang roared, and all the masked men stepped forward at the same time, closing in on Empyrean Fairy and the others. Empyrean Fairy stared and said to Feng Xinyang, Your husband's life is not in danger, take care of him. After saying that, she turned around and strode toward the enemy. Her speed became faster and faster until she finally turned into a wisp of smoke and rushed into the enemy. The masked man in the front had just raised his hand and was about to attack when the Empyrean Fairy swept past them. A bloody line appeared on their necks. The life in their eyes quickly dried up and they fell to the ground, dead. Bang. Ma. Yes. The first 3 syllables of the 6-syllable proverb came out of their mouths in one breath. The atmosphere suddenly changed and the air froze. The Empyrean Fairy's breathing involuntarily became heavier. Her cultivation base was extraordinary, and the effect of the non-phase method on her was particularly obvious. Although it was only 3 syllables, it had already slowed down her speed. After Feng Shishi and the others heard the 3 syllables, it was as if they were struck by a body-freezing spell. Their bodies stiffened, and it became very difficult for them to even lift their hands and feet. This was the non-phase method, the power of the 6-word maxim. Anyone with murderous intent would find it difficult to escape the attack of the non-phase method. At that time Linger and Li Xiaotian coincidentally had a pure state of mind and were not affected by the non-phase method, so they could help Tang Zheng. The Empyrean Fairy understood that it had reached the most dangerous time. If she continued to let the other party say all 6 syllables, then her action would be completely limited. She must not let them fully display the non-phase method. She took a deep breath and urged the mountain river map. The mountain river map shone brightly and the wind, rain, thunder and lightning attacked the enemy at the same time. The wind was blowing. The rainstorm was coming. The sound of thunder. Lightning fell. The most powerful attack of the mountain river map was displayed together. It was earth-shattering and everyone was moved. The Empyrean Fairy's control of the mountain river map and its magical powers were becoming more and more handy. This was the benefit of her gradual improvement after her resurrection. If it was before, she could not display the wind, rain, thunder and lightning attacks together. All of them were single attacks. This time it was completely different. The 4 most powerful attacks came unexpectedly, and it was breathtaking. When the attacks came together, the masked man seemed to be strangled by his throat. He abruptly swallowed the 4th syllable back and looked at the attacks falling from the air in horror. Whoosh! Suddenly a person flew up. His hands were changing and the complicated gestures seemed to be summoning some kind of power. The Empyrean Fairy's pupils shrank and she stared at the man and said, Ji Wuxiang, you finally showed up. She still remembered the scene of testing Ji Wuxiang. At the moment of life and death he could resist fighting back. This kind of willpower and control could be said to be at the peak of perfection. Therefore, when she later learned that Ji Wuxiang was the Lord, the Empyrean fairy was surprised. Now, facing Ji Wuxiang face to face, the murderous intent in her heart erupted like a volcano, surging out violently. Since you forced me to show up, then I'll let you experience the power of the celestial chess, Ji Wuxiang said loudly. The Empyrean fairy's heart tightened. Of course, she was not unfamiliar with the illustrious name of the celestial chess. However, wasn't the celestial chess in the capital? How could it be displayed in the Elysium? If that was really the case, then the celestial chess must have evolved. Ji Wuxiang's control of the celestial chess had reached another level. She had guessed correctly. Ji Wuxiang's control of the celestial chess had reached another level. He created the celestial chess, and his understanding was gradually deepening. He gradually realized that the essence and power of his celestial chess far exceeded his initial imagination. This time, the celestial chess was displayed for the first time in the Elysium. It was an experiment to let these people be the sacrifices of the celestial chess and witness its power. Then let's see if your celestial chess is more powerful or if my mountain river map is more powerful. The Empyrean fairy was not afraid. With a shout, the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning fell on Ji Wuxiang's head at the same time. All of this seemed to take a long time, but in reality, it happened in a flash. Crack. Ji Wuxiang's mask was split into two by an invisible force, revealing that familiar face. His cold and hard face was like a block of ice, and his eyes were even more like 10,000 years old ice that emitted a chilly aura, revealing a breathtaking aura. He slowly clenched his fist and roared with an imposing aura, "World return to origin." Whoosh whoosh. The aura between heaven and earth changed rapidly and gathered in his palm, as if the world was tied to his 5 fingers. A mysterious aura burst out from his palm. The wind, rain, thunder, and lightning stopped abruptly in front of his fist, forming a strange giant ball of light. A mysterious force seemed to be imprisoning them, making them unable to break free. Ji Wuxiang's eyes lit up and he was in high spirits. He said in a deep voice, "World return to origin between the palm of my hand, thousands of changes, but it does not deviate from its origin." He paused for a moment and then blurted out a word. "Break." Boom. A deafening sound completely covered the word break. A ray of white light exploded. It was the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning that had exploded. The powerful shockwave caused the walls to rustle and fall down, and sand and stones flew everywhere. It was a terrifying scene. The attack of the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning disappeared. The word break caused it to collapse and disappear into nothingness. A look of disbelief flashed across the Empyrean fairy's eyes. She knew that Ji Wuxiang's cultivation was definitely not comparable to hers, but why was he so powerful? Impossible. She subconsciously shook her head, unwilling to believe this scene. However, this was the truth. The power of the heavenly chess in Ji Wuxiang's hands was beyond imagination. No wonder he dared to follow them to the gate of heaven from so far away, and wasn't afraid of encountering the Empyrean fairy. "No, this is the gate of heaven, the only thing my father left me. How can I just give it to him?" The Empyrean fairy gritted her teeth and silently warned herself, her eyes bursting with light. Ji Wuxiang's expression became a little strange. He also didn't expect the newly comprehended world return to origin to have such power. It was far beyond his imagination. He was overjoyed and he understood the value of the heavenly chess even more. The heavenly chess was a new thing that he created by summing up the experience of the ancients, and then combining it with his own strange ideas and unique insights. He only knew a little about the heavenly chess. Now that he saw the new power of the heavenly chess, he couldn't help but feel a strong sense of pride. This was his great achievement. From ancient times until now, it was hard to find a martial artist who could be compared to him. His confidence soared, and his other hand clenched into a fist. He glared at the Empyrean fairy and said, "Do you still think you can stop me? The gate of heaven is mine, and the secrets of the gate of heaven will also belong to me. I will become the new emperor of heaven, ha." His wild laughter resounded through the gate of heaven. "Congratulations, honorable lord. Congratulations, honorable lord. Your divine power is unparalleled and you will unify the world." The masked men all knelt down in front of Ji Wuxiang and shouted in unison. Ji Wuxiang floated in midair, his demonic charm wild, his clothes fluttering, and his domineering aura unparalleled. When Fang Shishir and the others saw this scene, they couldn't hide their shock. The Empyrean fairy was already synonymous with invincible in their hearts, but now this scene happened. Ji Wuxiang actually blocked her attack. Just now, the combined attack of the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning had caused a deep shock in their hearts, allowing them to experience the terror of a true expert's attack. In their eyes, this level of attack was impossible to block, but reality proved that their thinking was too simple. Is this the power of the heavenly chess? How can the heavenly chess be so powerful? Many questions arose in their minds. Ji Wuxiang glanced at them from the corner of his eyes and also noticed their reactions. He said, "You people are just like ants. It's your honor to be able to witness the power of the heavenly chess. You can die in peace." *CKU nonsense. Feng Xinyang roared in exasperation. Fang Shishir took a step forward and said, "Don't think that everyone is afraid of you. Even if we die, what is there to be afraid of?" After saying this, she turned her head to look in the direction of the sacred armored shield and said in her heart, "Tang Jing, you must heal Ding Dang. You must survive." Everyone's hearts burned with a sense of tragedy. They all stood straight like swords that would rather break than bend. They were proud and awe-inspiring, causing others to respect them. Ji Wuxiang clearly understood their determination. He snorted and disdainfully said, "A group of reckless idiots. Then I will fulfill your wishes." Everyone got into their stances. Even Yen Qingyi, who didn't know any martial arts, stopped and clenched her fists. Her expression was resolute. At the same time, a thought appeared in her mind. Could it be that the voice that led her here wanted her to die? Chapter 12:27. The atmosphere was solemn and stirring, affecting everyone. Everyone walked towards Ji Wuxiang. Every step they took was very steady, as if they weighed a ton. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of footsteps hit the deepest part of everyone's heart. It was like a heavy blow again and again, shaking people's hearts. The Empyrean fairy took the lead and walked at the front. Her expression was firm and there was no trace of fear. Unlike the others, she did not have the solemn and stirring feeling of generously dying. Her pair of beautiful almond-shaped eyes stared straight at Ji Wuxiang. Their eyes met. There were no sparks, but the air seemed to have frozen between them. Other than the sound of footsteps, it was so quiet that it made people's hearts stop. Ji Wuxiang looked at this group of people indifferently. He did not hide the disdain and contempt on his face. His stretched fingers once again slowly clenched into a fist and clenched it tightly. "The world returns to its origin." These 4 words burst out of his mouth like a volcanic eruption. A huge amount of energy seemed to burst out as well. In an instant, it shrouded the divine gate. Everyone felt their hearts tighten. The feeling of suffocation fell from the sky and suppressed them until they could not breathe. However, they still did not stop. Instead, they counterattacked at the same time. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Beams of cold light flew towards Ji Wuxiang. They stopped abruptly. Time stood still. All the weapons stopped in front of Ji Wuxiang, unable to move forward. Everyone's face was as pale as a sheet of white paper. The Empyrean fairy did not attack. She was waiting for the best opportunity and was slowly accumulating power. "It's coming." She finished accumulating power. Her aura soared like the sun in the sky. Her beautiful hair fluttered and her eyes were like torches. She was mentally connected with the stately painting. A high-pitched voice rushed out of the painting. The stately painting shone brightly, completely illuminating the divine gate. Many people subconsciously closed their eyes. Some masked people tried to open their eyes wide, trying to see the appearance of the stately painting. However, they found that when the light flew into their eyes, blood flowed and their vision turned black. They lost their vision and became blind. Screams of agony rose and fell one after another. However, Fang Shishir and the others were not affected. Clearly, this was a different type of attack, only targeting Ji Wuxiang's people. Seeing such a tragic situation, Ji Wuxiang glared angrily. The power of celestial chess burst forth, imprisoning the lights. The lights stopped abruptly, stopping above the masked man's head, unable to descend any further. The Empyrean fairy's expression turned solemn as the pressure on her increased. She summoned wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Ji Wuxiang's expression did not change. His tightly clenched fist suddenly opened up. His 10 fingers flicked together and 10 streams of energy met the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Sparks flew, dazzling, and chi waves soared into the sky. The 2 of them quickly retreated. Fang Shishir and the rest were also affected. That powerful energy surged towards them with an earth-shattering momentum. They were like a small boat that would be smashed to pieces and sink to the bottom of the sea. The Empyrean fairy's expression changed slightly. She divided her attention, and a part of the stately painting's power was divided to protect these people. Bang! Fang Shishir and the others still flew out at the same time. They crashed into the wall and fell in a mess. The masked men did not gain any benefits. They were even more tragic. They did not receive Ji Wuxiang's protection. Many of them crashed into the wall, breaking their bones. Some even had their brains splattered. They died on the spot. Obviously, Ji Wuxiang did not care much about the life and death of these masked men. He watched as they were severely affected, indifferent. One side lost, the other side gained. The originally weak balance between celestial chess and stately painting was suddenly broken. The scales of victory leaned toward Ji Wuxiang. Whoosh! The Empyrean fairy retreated rapidly. The soles of her feet drew 2 long trenches on the stone floor. In the end, she crashed into the wall and stopped. An unusual and strange flush appeared on her face. Puff! She spat out a mouthful of blood. Her breathing immediately became chaotic and she became much weaker. Fu Yao! Everyone else was shocked and cried out in alarm. They surrounded her and started to care about her. Ji Wuxiang also retreated a long distance. However, his situation was much better than the Empyrean fairies. After all, he was not distracted. He actually gained the upper hand in this confrontation. The Empyrean fairy also tested the strength of her opponent and the celestial chess. In terms of cultivation, Ji Wuxiang was definitely not as good as the Empyrean fairy. However, the celestial chess he created was too powerful. It was far from being comparable to ordinary formations or spells. Even though the stately painting was a divine tool, it could not suppress it. After combining the two's combat level was not too different. If they used all their strength, it would be a hardy battle. However, at the beginning the Empyrean fairy lost because she was distracted. Moreover, the situation was not optimistic. The Empyrean fairy knew this very well. She secretly hated it, but she did not regret it. If she could do it again, she would still save people without hesitation. If it were her in the past, whether she could save people or not was still uncertain. This change was subtle. She herself did not have a strong sense of it. Ever since she interacted more and more with Tang Zheng and the people around her, her outlook on life changed a lot. These people seemed to have become a part of her life. Although they were not her family, they were an indispensable part. When they were in danger, she subconsciously wanted to save them. She did not want to leave them in the lurch. Looking at the sincere and concerned faces, a smile appeared on her face. She felt that the decision she made was very wise. Although she had lost, she had saved these people. This was a victory in another sense. Don't worry, I won't die. The Empyrean fairy comforted. With us here, you won't be at the front anymore. You should rest first. Fang Shishir clenched her teeth and said firmly, "Yes, we will stop him. You are powerful. Find a chance to protect yourself and avenge us in the future." Feng Xinyang said solemnly. She was ready to sacrifice herself. The Empyrean fairy felt a warm current flowing in her heart. It was as if it could melt her soul. On the other hand, the masked man was either dead or injured. It was a world of difference. There was an inexplicable sadness. Ji Wuxiang did not look at them. Instead, he looked disdainfully at the Empyrean fairy and the others. He said sarcastically, "What's the use of you fighting over each other? You're going to die anyway. It's just a matter of time. It doesn't make much of a difference." Fang Shishir and the others raised their heads and looked coldly at Ji Wuxiang. "Haha, since you're looking at me like that, it means you're determined to die. I'll fulfill your wish and send you on your way." Ji Wuxiang rushed up like a whirlwind. Fang Shishir jumped up and tried to block Ji Wuxiang. However, she fell from the sky. She was defeated in one move. She was utterly defeated. Yan Liuyun's vigorous figure also rose into the sky. However, he followed suit and fell beside Fang Shishir. Feng Xinyang would rather die than surrender. She straightened her body and looked affectionately at her husband. She said, "Tianlei, don't worry. Even if I die, I'll be by your side. In my next life, I'll still be your wife and give birth to a good daughter for you." 22 After saying this, she looked affectionately at the holy armored shield. She really wanted to see her daughter again. She believed that Tang Zheng would definitely protect her daughter. From the moment she met Tang Zheng, she was certain of this, which was why she did not hesitate to matchmake the two of them. This was the fate of the eyes in the unseen world. Yi Tianlei looked weakly at his wife. He moved his lips but did not say anything. However, his meaning was self-evident. A tear fell from the corner of his eye. Who said that men do not cry easily? It was only because they had not been deeply hurt. In this life, he believed that his greatest achievement was not being born into the Ye family. It was not being born into the world with a halo. It was not being able to cultivate to a high realm. There were only two things that he was most proud of. They were enough for him to be proud of for the rest of his life. One of them was that he married Feng Xinyang. The other was that he gave birth to a daughter, Yi Dingdang. These two things made him feel that his life was not in vain. However, as a husband and father, he believed that the things he gave his wife and daughter were far from enough. It was just that he could not make up for everything in this life. He hoped that he could meet them again in his next life and become a family to make up for the regrets in this life. Feng Xinyang understood his gaze. To have such a husband, her life was not in vain. She resolutely turned around and walked towards Ji Wuxiang. How could Ji Wuxiang put Feng Xinyang in his eyes? He disdainfully said, "Seeking your own death." So, a gust of wind swept over and Feng Xinyang flew out. A mouthful of blood stained the clothes on her chest. Yi Tianlei closed his eyes. His heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Suddenly there were only two people left standing. The Empyrean Fairy and Yan Qingyi. Yan Qingyi was not a martial artist nor a cultivator. She could be ignored. Ji Wuxiang knew this, so he directly ignored her. The Empyrean Fairy naturally would not let the powerless Yan Qingyi charge forward. Thus, she took the lead and used her body to build the last protective wall. She protected Yan Qingyi and the people behind the sacred shield. Yan Qingyi looked at the Empyrean Fairy's back with a burning gaze. Her heart was in turmoil. She had once fantasized about how good it would be if she was so strong that she could hold up the blue sky above her head. However, she was obsessed with Tao and had no other distractions. Everything else became insignificant. She had no time to practice martial arts. Thus, all of this could only be wishful thinking. The Empyrean Fairy controlled the stately painting and once again burst out with a dazzling light. She fought with Ji Wuxiang. The two were originally evenly matched. However, due to a freak combination of factors, one was injured and the other was unharmed. There was a huge gap in their strength. In a battle between experts, a slight difference could be the key to victory or defeat, let alone a difference of this level. Thus, the Empyrean Fairy was defeated without any surprise. She fell from mid-air. The painting of mountains and rivers of the gods of earth and vale dimmed and disappeared into her body. She did not fall. Instead, she leaned against the wall and watched helplessly as Ji Wuxiang walked past her. Ji Wuxiang was like a hot knife through butter. He won by a hair's breadth. Chapter 12:28. Ji Wuxiang looked at Yan Qingyi with disdain and said, "You're a weak woman who doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken, yet you're mixed up in this mess. Beautiful women are destined to have a short life." 520? He let out a long sigh, but he didn't have the slightest intention of showing tenderness to the fairer sex. With a flick of his finger, a gust of wind blew over, forming a wave shape in the air. Yan Qingyi was suppressed by this aura and couldn't move. She stared dumbstruck at this scene. Suddenly, a voice rang out in her mind. This voice was full of deep flavor and mysterious charm. In just a few words, it seemed to contain a profound mystery. Her heart was connected. Her eyes lit up as if she had been enlightened. Her body relaxed as if she had been relieved of a heavy burden and regained her freedom. Ji Wuxiang didn't notice this at all. He was confident in his heart as if he had already seen the scene of Yan Qingyi dying. However, in the next second his eyes stared straight. His heart trembled as he quickly turned his head. Because Yan Qingyi had disappeared. She disappeared from under Ji Wuxiang's eyes. His attack had completely missed. This was something that was impossible, but it really happened. Why is it like this? His brain seemed to have crashed as this question immediately appeared. But there was no answer to this question. He had already realized that something was wrong. Things weren't as simple as he thought. Yan Qingyi's fingers had unknowingly touched Ji Wuxiang's back. Ji Wuxiang's hair stood on end. Although he couldn't see, he immediately realized that something was wrong. He quickly turned around and tried to block Yan Qingyi. He wanted to see what was going on. But it was all too late. Yan Qingyi's fingers had already touched his back. Ji Wuxiang couldn't describe this feeling. He had never felt this before. It was like the legendary feeling of being on the verge of death. He seemed to have touched the finger of the Grim Reaper. He flew up like a kite with a broken string. Although he was in the air, he could clearly see the scene below. Yan Qingyi stood on the ground looking up at him. He was still the same person. However, the look in his eyes was completely different. A person's eyes could convey many things. Ji Wuxiang knew this very well. He was the best at reading people's minds. Judging from the look in Yan Qingyi's eyes at this moment, she seemed to have completely changed into another person. She was so unfathomable that it made one's heart palpitate. Regardless of whether he was facing the Empyrean fairy or a person of high status, he had never felt that the other party was unfathomable. He was a person with an extremely high IQ and talent. Normal people would not be able to enter his eyes. Yan Qingyi's eyes were too special. This feeling arose spontaneously and he didn't need to think too much about it. "Who are you?" Ji Wuxiang asked loudly. He knew that this was definitely not Yan Qingyi. It was impossible for a person to hide so deeply. Otherwise it would be too terrifying. It might even surpass him by far. He did not want to admit this point. Yan Qingyi's eyes were indifferent. It seemed that in her eyes she did not think highly of Ji Wuxiang at all. That kind of imposing manner and artistic conception of looking down on the world could not be faked. "Who are you? How dare you barge into the divine gate?" Yan Qingyi's voice was still her voice, but the cadence and rhythm had completely changed. Her voice was not too loud and it was not as sharp as a knife. However, it had a kind of magical power that made people prostrate themselves in worship. The others also saw this scene and looked at Yan Qingyi as if they had seen a ghost. All of this was indeed like seeing a ghost. It could not be explained by common sense. Yan Qingyi had completely changed into another person. The key was who this person was. Yan Luyun looked at her with a burning gaze, his eyes shining. After all, he and Yan Qingyi were family. Seeing her so powerful, he had a sense of doubt and even more so, a sense of honor. The others were even more confused and did not know what was going on. Only the Empyrean fairy's dispirited state was swept away. She was in high spirits as she looked at Yan Qingyi without blinking. Between her eyebrows, there was an inconceivable look of pleasant surprise. She opened her mouth and muttered, "Could it be? This is..." Before she could finish speaking, Ji Wuxiang hit the wall and stopped. He spat out a mouthful of blood which dyed his clothes red. He was like a soft-footed shrimp as he softly slid to the ground. He quickly stood up straight and looked at Yan Qingyi with a complicated expression, asking, "You? Who are you? You barged into the divine gate, but you don't know who the master of the divine gate is?" Yan Qingyi asked sternly. Ji Wuxiang was stunned for a moment, then shook his head blankly and said, "Impossible, the divine gate is the Wuxia clan's secret ground. Could it be that you are from the Wuxia clan? Could it be that other than the Empyrean fairy, there are other people from the Wuxia clan in this world?" He racked his brains but was unable to find the answer. Yan Qingyi said indifferently, "You actually know that the divine gate is the Wuxia clan's secret ground? Then you still dare to have ideas about the divine gate. Aren't you courting death?" Once the word "courting death" was said, the atmosphere changed again as a fierce wind blew. This time Ji Wuxiang was like a small boat that could capsize at any time. Ji Wuxiang felt that this was absurd and unreal. Yan Qingyi actually said the word "courting death" to him. Wasn't this the word he always used to mock others? Every dog has its day and this time it was his turn. This was a great irony. Ji Wuxiang's face and ears were red. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the fear in his heart. He gathered his courage and shouted, "So what if you are from the Wuxia clan? You have already become history. You have already been eliminated by history and disappeared from this world. No matter if it is now or in the future, this world belongs to me. You are already a thing of the past." These words seemed to be to encourage himself, but it also seemed to be repeatedly instilling this idea into his mind. Ji Wuxiang was riding a tiger and could not back down. He was being roasted on the fire. He could only advance and not retreat. If he retreated, he would lose. Since Yan Qingyi's body had such a miraculous change, then it meant that the divine gate's secret was extremely important. It had an immeasurable value to him. He could not give up so easily. Yan Qingyi's change was so great that even Ji Wuxiang was shocked. His originally firm confidence seemed to have been shaken at this moment. He forcefully threw away all distracting thoughts so that he would not immediately fall apart. Yan Qingyi looked at Ji Wuxiang as if she was looking at a clown. She lightly shook her head and said, "The heavenly Tao is reincarnated. How can the Wuxia clan be eliminated by history? Instead, it is you who will be eliminated by history. Today I will let you know the power of the Wuxia clan." The two's conversation conveyed too much information. Everyone stared with their eyes wide open. Wasn't this Yan Qingyi? How did she become a member of the Wuxia clan? The Empyrean fairy's gaze towards Yan Qingyi gradually became sentimental. It was filled with deep emotions. That kind of affectionate look had never appeared before. It was just that everyone else was focused on Yan Qingyi and did not notice the Empyrean fairy's strange behavior. Ji Wuxiang heard this and his expression changed slightly. He forced himself to be alert. Finally, he could not withstand the heavy pressure that Yan Qingyi was transmitting. He roared and rushed forward again. Chapter 1229. Ji Wuxiang faced the heavy pressure and rushed towards Yan Qingyi. Yan Qingyi did not move. She pointed her finger and the qi in the gate of heaven changed. Ji Wuxiang's attack stopped abruptly in front of Yan Qingyi. The space seemed to have frozen as the two faced each other in mid-air. Their eyes met, silently clashing. Yan Qingyi was indifferent. Ji Wuxiang bared his teeth, his face ferocious. He exerted all his strength, but it was as if he was punching a ball of cotton. It had no effect at all. Instead, there was a rebounding force from his fist. Crack. The sound of bones breaking was especially ear-piercing. A crack appeared on Ji Wuxiang's fist, and blood flowed out from the crack. It was a ghastly sight. Many people sucked in cold breaths. Ji Wuxiang's face was filled with pain. He retreated in panic and looked at Yan Qingyi in shock. He was speechless for a long time. Just now, although it had only been a short time, too many thought-provoking things had happened. He had been defeated. He had been utterly defeated. Yan Qingyi played it down. He had used all of his strength, but he was still defeated. This was the difference between them. It was too obvious. The others looked at the two in disbelief. The two looked at each other from afar and did not move. Could it be that the outcome was decided just like that? Victory? Yan Qingyi chuckled. Was there still a need to decide? How could Ji Wuxiang be her opponent? Yan Qingyi had this kind of confidence. It was not blind arrogance, but because she had the strength. Do you still dare to say that the Fu clan has been eliminated by history? Yan Qingyi asked. Ji Wuxiang clenched his teeth and was speechless for a long time. The greatness of the Fu clan is not something an ordinary person like you can understand. The Fu clan is the descendant of the Emperor of Heaven. They are the sons of heaven. You are too insignificant. You are not even 1/10,000th of the Fu clan. Yan Qingyi ridiculed him mercilessly. Ji Wuxiang's face turned white and red. He did not care about the injury on his hand and wanted to launch his final counterattack. Blood flowed from his wound to the ground and dyed the stone floor under his feet red. Bang! He landed on the ground with one foot, stomping heavily on the stone floor. Blood splattered everywhere, turning into blood-red beads that filled the space in front of him. With a thought, the blood droplets flew out. Under the control of the heavenly chess power, they were like millions of arrows, but their power was far stronger than the arrows. The blood droplets merged with the heavenly chess power, and the power that burst forth increased exponentially. Whoosh whoosh. A bloody wind rose, bringing with it a nauseating stench of blood as it rushed towards Yan Qingyi. Whoosh. The bloody wind swept past the stone wall, and the stone wall fell down with a rustling sound. It was eroded by the bloody wind in an instant. This is, Mystic Maiden of the Nine Heavens, and the others widened their eyes. Ji Wuxiang's attack this time could be said to be monstrous. If it were them, perhaps only the Mystic Maiden of the Nine Heavens at her peak would be able to withstand it. Immediately, Empyrean Fairy understood the source of all this. It was the heavenly chess. The heavenly chess was too mysterious. It could actually increase a person's power by so much. However, Empyrean Fairy had absolute confidence in Yan Qingyi. She recognized Yan Qingyi. Or rather, she recognized who the current Yan Qingyi was. Yan Qingyi was, of course, not Yan Qingyi herself. It was someone else. Fuxi. This name was obvious. The ancestor of the Fu clan, the famous Emperor of Heaven. A strand of Fuxi's soul had attached itself to Yan Qingyi's body. That was why she could unleash such great power. Of course, as the Emperor of Heaven, Fuxi's power was far greater than that. However, Empyrean Fairy couldn't understand why her father would attach himself to Yan Qingyi. Could it be that she had something special about her? Also, other than leaving behind the gate of heaven, there was also a strand of his soul in the gate of heaven. When she first woke up, she didn't realize this and left the gate of heaven, missing the opportunity to meet her father. Empyrean Fairy was filled with regret. She looked at Yan Qingyi with tears in her eyes. Good luck. Empyrean Fairy silently cheered for Yan Qingyi. The masked men all cheered, sweeping away their previous depression. Just now, when Ji Wuxiang was injured, these people felt as if they had experienced it themselves. It was as if there was a huge rock pressing down on their hearts. They all became silent. Now it was as if they had won a battle. They looked at Ji Wuxiang with burning eyes. She'll be fine, right? Yan Luyuan angrily asked, but also seemed to be comforting himself. Yan Qingyi was his aunt. They were connected by blood. Although he didn't understand how she suddenly became so strong, but seeing Ji Wuxiang's powerful attack, he couldn't help but worry for her. Empyrean Fairy looked at him and then gave the others a comforting and encouraging look. She said with certainty, "Don't worry. How could Ji Wuxiang be her match?" Seeing her strong confidence, although they didn't understand what was going on, everyone temporarily put their hearts back into their stomachs. Yan Qingyi lightly walked towards Ji Wuxiang. She didn't move in the slightest in the midst of the bloody storm. It was as if her feet were connected to the earth and couldn't be shaken in the slightest. The bloody storm messed up her hair and fluttered her clothes. Her eyes became brighter and brighter like the light of the stars. It was so bright that people couldn't look at her directly. Ji Wuxiang felt as if his whole body had been scraped by a knife when her gaze swept past him. It was a burning pain and he couldn't help but shudder. Yan Qingyi looked straight at Ji Wuxiang, who was getting closer and closer. She once again stretched out her slender finger and lightly tapped Ji Wuxiang. Pop. A very soft sound, like a stone being thrown into a lake, broke everything in front of her. A huge hole was torn in the bloody storm. Then this hole became bigger and bigger, as if space itself was being torn apart. The bloody storm came to an abrupt end in this tear. There was no sound. This is... Ji Wuxiang's eyes almost popped out. He had an ominous premonition that his painstaking counterattack was about to fail. Fail. Could he accept it? Of course not. His eyes became crimson red. He roared with all his strength, "World restoration!" The power of the celestial chess increased again. The wind and clouds in the divine gate changed. The bloody storm came again. The others were affected. They also looked like they were facing the Grim Reaper. Their faces turned pale and they resisted with difficulty. Bang! 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 A few masked men flew up like birds with broken wings. They hit the wall hard. Their heads were bleeding and their brains were splattered. They died on the spot. The Empyrean Fairy took out the mountain river map to protect her companions so that they wouldn't follow in the masked men's footsteps. Swaying in the wind and rain, Yan Qingyi was bathed in it, yet he was as resolute as a boulder. He didn't waver in the slightest as he calmly walked towards Ji Wuxiang. At such a close distance they could even hear each other's breathing. "Who are you? How can you resist the celestial chess?" Ji Wuxiang swallowed his saliva and asked. "Is this the celestial chess?" "It's just SOSO. Yan Qingyi said calmly. "Just SOSO. These 4 words were like a clap of thunder exploding on Ji Wuxiang's head. He swayed and almost fell down. He summed up the efforts of the ancients and spent most of his life to create the celestial chess. But in the eyes of the other party, it was just SOSO. This was a huge irony. It made him have the urge to vomit blood. Yan Qingyi continued, "You're not mature enough yet, but you're also vainly trying to meddle with the divine gate." She shook her head and sighed, "There's a path to heaven, but you don't take it. There's only one path to hell." What was this path? Even an idiot could guess. Ji Wuxiang's heart trembled. He immediately realized that something was wrong. Die. Yan Qingyi spat out this word. The wind and clouds changed color. Ji Wuxiang immediately realized that he was sucked into a huge whirlpool. This whirlpool seemed to be bottomless. It was going to swallow him up completely. He hurriedly activated his power and communicated with the celestial chess. But at this time he realized the limitations of the celestial chess. This was not the capital. The celestial chess real use was limited. It was effective against many people, but in front of Yan Qingyi, it lost some of its power. He flew up. He was like a leaf spinning in a whirlpool, drifting around randomly. "Ah!" The masked man cried out in surprise. The cheers from before had long disappeared. He looked at Ji Wuxiang, who was flying in the air in a panic. Ji Wuxiang had never been in such a sorry state in his life, especially in front of his subordinates. He wanted to find a hole to hide in. He had to fight back. Otherwise it would be like what Yan Qingyi said. He would die without a doubt. He wouldn't even have the chance to hide in a hole. "Get out of the divine gate," Yan Qingyi suddenly said. As soon as she finished speaking, a gust of wind swept up in the divine gate and flew out of the divine gate. The other masked men wailed. Together with Ji Wuxiang, they were swept out of the divine gate by the gust of wind and completely disappeared. The divine gate regained its peace. There was no longer any threat. However, everyone's hearts didn't return to their stomachs. Instead they stared at Yan Qingyi with burning eyes. All of this was too mysterious. Everyone was curious. Why did Yan Qingyi become like this? From the beginning to the end, Yan Qingyi was very calm. She looked in the direction of the divine gate's entrance and sighed deeply. The celestial chess is indeed extraordinary. The others didn't understand. She clearly didn't care about the celestial chess at all before. Why did she care so much about it now? The Empyrean fairy understood her father very well. She asked telepathically, "Could it be that you also don't have a way to completely resist the celestial chess?" Yan Qingyi turned around. She swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. The expression in her eyes changed drastically. She stared at the Empyrean fairy with burning eyes. A huge fluctuation appeared in her eyes. She was no longer as calm as before. The Empyrean fairy also fell into silence. She and Yan Qingyi looked at each other in the eyes. Too many things were conveyed through their eyes. The others looked at the two people in surprise. They muttered in their hearts. Yan Qingyi kept saying that she was from the Fu clan. Isn't she from the Yin family? How did she get involved with the Fu clan? Also, the Empyrean fairy's real name was Fu Yao. She was also from the Fu clan. What was her relationship with Yan Qingyi? Judging from the two people's reactions, there were probably too many unknown things that were worth thinking about. The two people were like two magnets. The Empyrean fairy walked step by step towards Yan Qingyi. Yan Qingyi also looked at her and approached her. The others suppressed their curiosity and questions. They stared at the scene with their eyes wide open. They didn't know what would happen next. Chapter 1230. It was as if the Empyrean fairy and Yan Qingyi had been paralyzed. They stared at each other in silence. At this moment she was no longer Yan Qingyi, but rather the Emperor of Heaven. "Yao, have you been well these past few years?" The Emperor of Heaven asked. "Yao, This name caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Who had the qualifications to call the Empyrean fairy this way? Even if Tang Zheng had a close relationship with her, he definitely wouldn't call her that. "Father." The Empyrean fairy emotionally shouted, two streams of hot tears flowing from her eyes. "Yao." The Emperor of Heaven also became emotional. The two threw themselves together and tightly hugged each other. The Emperor of Heaven's eyes also flashed with tears. What was going on? How did Yan Qingyi become the Empyrean fairy's father? Everyone else's jaws dropped to the ground. Their brains lost the ability to think as they stared blankly at this scene. The Empyrean fairy laid in the Emperor of Heaven's embrace. She raised her head and asked with tears in her eyes, "Father, Yao missed you so much." The Emperor of Heaven gently stroked her hair and kindly said, "Father also missed you. It's been a few years, but Father has finally seen you again. Father, when I first woke up, why didn't you come out to see me? That way we could have met several thousand years ago. Do you know how much Yao missed you these past few years?" The Empyrean fairy returned to her daughter's appearance. She was as cute as a little girl. "Father is only a strand of soul. I slept for several thousand years and was awakened by this battle. Then I possessed this little girl's body to help you repel the enemy," the Emperor of Heaven said. Everyone suddenly understood. No wonder Yan Qingyi suddenly became so powerful. It was because she was possessed by the Emperor of Heaven's soul. This little girl's talent is extremely high. If I hadn't met her, I wouldn't have been able to help you. Is that so? The Empyrean fairy had heard about Yan Qingyi from Tang Zheng and knew a thing or two about her. She said, "She knows the art of prophecy." Moreover, according to her, there was something that led her here this time. That's why she decided to travel with us even though she's powerless. Prophecy? She's so young yet she knows prophecy? The Emperor of Heaven was surprised. The Empyrean fairy was well aware of how bizarre and miraculous this was. She said in agreement, yes, she seemed to have comprehended the great Tao of heaven and earth, and then learned the art of prophecy. Is that so? So that's how it is. The Emperor of Heaven seemed to be deep in thought. The Empyrean fairy didn't see the contemplative look in her father's eyes. Instead, she asked excitedly, "Father, since your soul is still here, then you can be reborn." Of course. The Empyrean fairy was wild with joy. She almost jumped up and hugged Yan Qingyi tightly. She didn't want to let go. That. Yan Luyun was intimidated by the Emperor of Heaven's imposing manner. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly. However, when he heard this, he couldn't help but muster up his courage. He asked in a trembling voice, "Excuse me, if you possess my aunt's body, then what will happen to her? Is she going to die?" Yan Qingyi had a very special position in the Yen family. She was the apple of the Yen family's eye. Although she didn't know martial arts, she had won the respect of many people. Yan Luyun was one of them. At this moment he had to stand up and speak up for Yan Qingyi. As soon as he said this, Everyone turned their heads and stared at Yen Luyun. Although Yen Luyun was used to being stared at by so many people, this time was different. His heart was in turmoil and he was anxious. How could she die? The Emperor of Heaven turned his head and stared at him. Yen Luyun was delighted and asked, "Then when can she come back?" What he meant was, "When can you leave Yen Qingyi's body?" Before the Emperor of Heaven could answer, the Empyrean fairy couldn't help but say loudly, "Yen Luyun, what do you mean by that? Are you afraid that my father will take over her body?" The Empyrean fairy's protective nature was revealed. Yen Luyun resentfully said, "Of course not." The Emperor of Heaven waved his hand and said, "Young man, don't worry. How could I take over her body? I am the dignified Emperor of Heaven. How could I be such a person who would lower myself?" Yen Luyun's heart that was hanging in the air finally returned to his stomach. He revealed a relieved smile and said, "With your words, I'm relieved." On the way to the gate of heaven, they already knew that the Empyrean fairy was the daughter of the Emperor of Heaven. Her status was noble, so the identity of the soul that possessed Yen Qingyi's body was naturally obvious. "It's your family's fortune to have her," the Heavenly Emperor said mysteriously. Fortunate to have a family? Yen Luyun was confused, not knowing what he meant. The Emperor of Heaven deliberately gave a mysterious smile and said, "You will know in the future." The Empyrean fairy's heart was filled with suspicions. She also wanted to ask, but seeing her father's expression, she suppressed her curiosity. "What did you come to the gate of heaven for this time?" The Emperor of Heaven let go of the Empyrean fairy and curiously asked. "To save someone." The Empyrean fairy's gaze looked towards the direction of Tang Zheng's sacred armor shield. The Emperor of Heaven suspiciously turned his head and also saw the sacred armor shield. He asked, "Who is inside?" "A person with the 9-yang saint body. A celestial." The Emperor of Heaven revealed an expression of shock. It was enough to shock him. It could be seen just how extraordinary a celestial's identity was. The Empyrean fairy nodded, "Yes, this person is your daughter's companion." A celestial has the 9-yang saint body, so he really does need the purine energy in the skybed. The Emperor of Heaven suddenly said. "No, it's not to save him but to save someone else. That person's purine energy has been sucked dry, so he needs the purine energy in the skybed to help her recover," the Empyrean fairy explained. The Emperor of Heaven fell into deep thought. His eyes lit up as he hit the nail on the head and said, "If he wants to absorb the purine energy in the skybed, then there must be an expert guiding him." The Empyrean fairy had always been curious as to what method Tang Zheng used to guide the purine energy into Yi Dingdong's body. Hearing the Emperor of Heaven say this, she quickly asked, "Father, why do you say this? Normal people would not know about this method. This is a method passed down from ancient times. Even you do not know about it." The Emperor of Heaven's expression became thought-provoking. This was because he knew that only by using the power of yin and yang would he be able to freely circulate the purine energy and absorb it into his body. Originally, he did not choose this method to save his daughter because he would not allow a man to sully his daughter. The others were also very curious about the specific method to save the person. They all stared at him like curious babies. The Emperor of Heaven looked at the others and mysteriously said, "As long as it can save the person, it's fine. There's no need to ask about the specific method." The Emperor of Heaven was clearly evading the question and no one could ask. After all, the Emperor of Heaven's status was illustrious. He was not a normal person. The Empyrean fairy also did not delve into it. Instead, she remembered a question from before and asked, "Father, you said that the sky chess is not ordinary. Could it be related to you letting them go in the end?" The others could not see it, but the Empyrean fairy was very clear about the Emperor of Heaven's strength. In the end, Ji Wuxiang and the masked man were both swept away by the whirlwind. It seemed like they had failed, but in reality they did not die. The Emperor of Heaven must have done this for some reason. The Emperor of Heaven looked at his daughter with gratification. His daughter knew him best. She had guessed correctly. After all, the Emperor of Heaven was only a wisp of his soul. He was not at his peak, so his strength was limited. If he wanted to get rid of Ji Wuxiang, he would have to completely surpass the sky chess. However, the Emperor of Heaven realized that it was impossible. The strength of the sky chess was beyond the Emperor of Heaven's imagination. If he was at his peak, it would naturally not be a problem. However, for the current him, it was impossible for him to achieve this. However, he could not easily let go of those who tried to encroach on the Elysium. Therefore, after teaching Ji Wuxiang and the masked man a harsh lesson in his best condition, he purposely showed that he did not care about the sky chess at all. Compared to physical attacks, This would create more pressure and psychological trauma for Ji Wuxiang. The Emperor of Heaven had lived for so many years. How intelligent and insightful was he? With a single glance, he could see the position of the sky chess in Ji Wuxiang's heart. He purposely said, "It's just so," in order to completely destroy his will. Currently the effect was not bad. If Ji Wuxiang could not walk out of the shadow, then he would not be able to recover from the setback and become an insignificant person. He could not even be called an enemy. If Ji Wuxiang walked out of the shadow, then he would definitely become even stronger. His understanding of the sky chess would also reach a higher level. He would become a truly powerful enemy or even a threat. The Emperor of Heaven understood this at that time, but he still acted without hesitation. His decisiveness was evident from this. Yes, the sky chess is extraordinary. If that person's understanding of the sky chess reaches a higher level, then he will definitely become a huge threat. Therefore, I purposely said those words to destroy his will, the Emperor of Heaven explained concisely. Hearing this, the Empyrean fairy's heart trembled. She had still underestimated Ji Wuxiang. Her father had actually said that he had the chance to become a huge threat. This was coming from the Emperor of Heaven. She understood very well what these words meant. She smacked her lips, not knowing what to say. When the others heard the Emperor of Heaven praise the sky chess and Ji Wuxiang so highly, they were secretly somewhat indignant, but they were also extremely shocked. This person is a peerless genius who can create the sky chess. Although I have only seen the surface of the sky chess, I have already understood its subtleties. The Emperor of Heaven had a unique insight. He had only fought with Ji Wuxiang for a very short period of time, but he had already discovered many things. The Empyrean fairy was silent for a long time. After a moment of silence, she said, "Then I hope he will be unable to recover from this setback." "I hope so." At this moment, Ji Wuxiang was standing outside the gate of heaven. He was in a daze as if his will had been taken away. His eyes were dim and he muttered, "That's all, that's all." These 4 words seemed to have a magical power that reverberated in his mind. It was impossible to get rid of them. It was also like a curse that was fiercely branded into his brain. He couldn't care less about his severe injuries. He stared blankly at the gate of heaven. The gate of heaven was already closed, so he couldn't see the situation inside. However, he could foresee that with that mysterious Yan Qingyi, no one could pry into the secrets of the gate of heaven. Moreover, Ji Wuxiang couldn't care about the secrets of the gate of heaven. He put all his thoughts on the sky chess. The more he thought, the more his head hurt. He couldn't help but hold his head and roll on the ground, crying out in pain. There weren't many masked men left. Seeing this scene, they quickly helped him up and ran away in panic. Chapter 1231. In Heaven's Gate, everyone was thinking about what had happened. They were shocked and had mixed feelings. Empyrean Fairy had always remembered the rumors about Heaven's Gate. In addition, Ji Wuxiang had chased after them from far away. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "Father, there are rumors that Heaven's Gate contains the secret of the Fu clan. Once you obtain this secret, you can become the new Emperor of Heaven. Is it true?" Emperor of Heaven looked kindly at Empyrean Fairy. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Do you know the origin of our Fu clan?" "Of course I do." Empyrean Fairy nodded without hesitation. "We are the descendants of Fuxi's ancestors." Yes, Fuxi is the first Emperor of Heaven since ancient times. After that, many Emperor of Heaven appeared in our Fu clan. The Emperor of Heaven is not only a symbol of strength, but also because we are able to communicate with the heavens. That is why we can be called the Emperor of Heaven. Emperor of Heaven said without stopping. Empyrean Fairy nodded. This was the history she knew. She didn't know why her father wanted to bring it up again. This was an eye-opener for the others. Originally, they thought that the title of Celestial Emperor was just a title for a powerful cultivator. They didn't expect that there would be so many conditions. Communicating with the heavens and hearing from the heavens was too high and too mysterious. No one doubted this point because it came from Emperor of Heaven's mouth. Only our Fu clan can become the Emperor of Heaven. This made many people jealous. Many people researched and tried to find out the secret. They really put in a lot of effort. Empyrean Fairy frowned and interrupted, "Father, is there really a secret?" "What do you think?" Empyrean Fairy thought back to how certain the others were. She was skeptical and asked, "Is there really a secret?" "Aha, you have indeed grown up. You know how to think. You are much stronger than before." The Emperor of Heaven was perceptive and knew very well that the Fuyao back then wasn't that formidable. She was proud to the bone and had never experienced wind and rain. She was a flower that grew up in a greenhouse. Now that they were reunited after such a long time, the Empyrean fairy gave the Emperor of Heaven a very different feeling. It was as if she was a completely different person but a much better person. The Emperor of Heaven was happy from the bottom of his heart. Perhaps this was growing up. Without the protection of parents, one could grow up the fastest. He had spoiled her too much in the past. The Emperor of Heaven let out a long sigh. When the Empyrean fairy heard this, she blushed and said shyly, "Father, I was immature in the past and made you worry." The Emperor of Heaven held her hand kindly and said, "Yao, you are my daughter. No matter what you do, Father will support you. This is what a father should do." No, I was immature in the past. When I thought back, I realized that Father had sacrificed too much for me. Too much. The Empyrean fairy said emotionally. It was as if the celestial the arch had eaten honey, and he was so moved that a smile bloomed on his face. You guessed right. There is indeed a secret that the Fu clan can produce generations of Emperor of Heaven. The Emperor of Heaven suddenly said. The Empyrean fairy frowned and asked in surprise, "What secret?" Heavenly Book. Heavenly Book? A huge question mark appeared in the minds of the others. What was a heavenly book? The Empyrean fairy had never heard of the heavenly book. She looked at the Emperor of Heaven in confusion. A huge question mark seemed to be carved on her forehead. What is a heavenly book? The heavenly book is the sacred scripture that every generation of Emperor of Heaven studied and cultivated. Only the candidate for the position of Emperor of Heaven has the chance to see the true appearance of the heavenly book. The others do not even have the chance to hear of it, let alone comprehend the mysteries of the heavenly book. Every generation of Emperor of Heaven would spend their entire life searching for the next Emperor of Heaven in the clan. Then they would be groomed. Finally, after passing various tests, they would be taught the heavenly book. It was as if the Emperor of Heaven had slowly pulled open a curtain for everyone, allowing the colorful information to rush in. The Empyrean fairy's reaction could be seen. She was also shocked. Her mouth opened so wide that an egg could be stuffed in. She had lived in the clan for so many years, but she did not discover this secret. However, she did not blame her father. Just like he said, this was the Fu clan's biggest secret. It was normal that she did not know. There is no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Outsiders have been guessing for a long time, but in the end they found some clues. They knew that the Fu clan was able to produce generation after generation of Emperor of Heaven. It was just that they did not know about the existence of the heavenly book. The Emperor of Heaven sighed and said regretfully, How could this be? There is nothing absolute in this world and there is no absolute secret. You must remember this." The Emperor of Heaven solemnly warned, his expression incomparably solemn. The Empyrean fairy was shocked. She subconsciously looked at the others. Since this matter was such a huge secret, why did her father say it in front of so many people? Wasn't he afraid that the walls might have ears? Fang Shirsher and the others noticed the Empyrean fairy's gaze and immediately realized this problem. Their hearts became uneasy. Didn't the ancients always like to put on this kind of show? Purposely saying something secret in front of others meant that the people who heard these words would not have long to live. A gust of cold air rose from his back with a whoosh. Compared to the Empyrean fairy and the Emperor of Heaven, they were as weak as ants. They could not withstand a single blow. The Empyrean fairy also thought that her father had such a plan. Her heart sank. She looked at everyone worriedly. She moved her lips and said hesitantly, "Father, they are all my friends." The Celestial the Arch was very smart and immediately understood what she was thinking. He glanced at the others and they all kept quiet out of fear. It was as if a cold light had flashed past their necks. They suddenly shrank back and subconsciously avoided his gaze. Ha ha ha. The Celestial Emperor laughed heartily. Yan Qingyi's voice had originally been crisp and clear, but it was less dignified and more amiable. "What are you thinking about? They are your friends who fought alongside you, Yao. Why would I harm them? Moreover, the Emperor of Heaven understands the will of the heavens. Why would he kill the innocent?" The Empyrean fairy blushed. She almost misunderstood her father. She really should not have. She said embarrassedly, "Father, I'm sorry." The Emperor of Heaven waved his hand and said, "The heavenly tomes might have been a secret a few thousand years ago. However, ever since that incident, it is no longer a secret. Although the public still does not know about it, many people who are observant still know about the existence of the heavenly tomes. This is the secret that allowed the Fu clan to nurture the Emperor of Heaven. That person just now naturally came for the heavenly tomes." "That incident? What incident?" The Empyrean fairy realized that she did not know about this incident again. She could not help but feel a chill in her heart. She hurriedly asked, "It seems like this incident disappeared in the long river of history. That is why it was not passed down. Even you do not know about it. Only a few people were involved in that incident. It is normal that it did not spread widely." The Emperor of Heaven found a reasonable explanation for himself. The Empyrean fairy became more and more confused as she listened. She really did not understand what her father was talking about. However, it must be something very important. The Emperor of Heaven seemed to be deliberately keeping her in suspense. He was still not in a hurry to reveal the key point. Instead he asked, "Yao heir, with your temper, when you woke up that year, you must have investigated how I died. Am I right?" The Empyrean fairy nodded her head honestly. Nobody knows a daughter better than a father. However, back then I did not obtain any valuable investigation results. Because firstly, the history is too long. Secondly, this incident seems to be too secretive. Furthermore, our Fu clan has completely disappeared from history. This matter has always been bothering me. Our Fu clan was so powerful back then. How could it disappear just like that? It was as if it had disappeared from the face of the earth. There was no trace of it at all. This was a problem that had always troubled the Empyrean fairy. No matter how hard she scratched her head, she could not figure out the reason behind it. After all, she was a member of the Fu clan. She was one of the people involved. She deeply understood how powerful the Fu clan was. How could it disappear so completely? The Emperor of Heaven's gaze was deep. It was as if he had sunk into deep memories. After pondering for a long time, he said, "Perhaps this was the calamity that befell the Fu clan. The Fu clan was at the right place at the right time. They produced many talented people. There was no doubt that they were the #1 clan in the world back then. Perhaps all the good things in the world could not be monopolized by one clan. In the end, the calamity of the clan's annihilation occurred." The calamity of the clan's annihilation? The Empyrean fairy's heart tightened. Her breathing involuntarily quickened. Yes, a mysterious enemy appeared out of nowhere. It was as if he came from another world. He brought with him an undefeatable power and swept away all the powers in this world. As the Emperor of Heaven, the Fu clan was the most powerful clan. Of course, I could not sit idly by and do nothing. In the end, we launched a counterattack. We engaged in one great battle after another with this mysterious enemy. The Emperor of Heaven paused. It was as if he had sunk into deep memories. As the person involved, and even more so as the Emperor of Heaven, he had personally participated in the events of the past. It was still vivid in his mind as if it had happened yesterday. How he wished that none of this had happened. History could not be repeated. This was an extravagant hope. The others pricked up their ears. They were completely shocked by the shocking description of the Emperor of Heaven. Their curiosity was also aroused. Who are these people? The Empyrean fairy felt as if her heart was being squeezed. She could not hide her anger as she asked. At first we did not know who they were. But later on, in the great battles, we finally obtained some useful information. They really did come from another world. As for their name, they called themselves the Dragon Slayers. The Emperor of Heaven sighed and said this name with a heavy heart. The 3 words Dragon Slayers meant too many things to him. It was too heavy. Although it had been thousands of years, it was still like a huge boulder pressing down on his heart, making it difficult for him to breathe. Dragon Slayers? The Empyrean fairy was shocked. This name was actually somewhat familiar. Suddenly her mind flashed. She remembered that Tang Zheng had occasionally mentioned this name to her. It seemed to have something to do with the Dragon Clan. But how did the Dragon Slayers have anything to do with the Fu clan's annihilation? What was the secret behind all of this? Her beautiful eyebrows furrowed like 2 curved blades. It was quite sharp. The Emperor of Heaven heard another layer of meaning in his daughter's words. He asked, "You also know about the Dragon Slayers?" Chapter 1232. The 3 words Dragon Slayer attracted everyone's attention, especially the Emperor of Heaven, who stared at his daughter without blinking. The Empyrean fairy nodded and said, "Yes, I heard Tang Jing mention it before. It seems to be related to the dragon race?" Back then, Tang Jing had only mentioned it by chance and did not explain in detail, so she only knew half of it. Seeing that his daughter knew about it, and that it was someone else who told her, he could not help but be curious. He looked towards the holy armored shield and said, "He actually knows about the Dragon Slayer. He is not simple. He has a dragon on him. It should be it who told him." Dragon? The Emperor of Heaven was shocked. He had seen the dragon race before, so he knew how powerful they were. However, the dragon race was arrogant by nature and had powerful Fa, making them extremely difficult to tame. Of course, he had not tamed a dragon before. This brat actually had a dragon on him. This was really unexpected. The Empyrean fairy obviously knew this as well. She was the witness of Tang Zheng taming the golden dragon. Although it was not glorious, it was still a success. She still admired Tang Zheng's courage and spirit. Father, are the dragon slayer really that powerful? Is our entire clan not a match for him? The Empyrean fairy asked in disbelief. The Emperor of Heaven did not nod or shake his head. After a moment of silence he said, the dragon slayer is indeed powerful. In terms of individual strength, many people in our clan are not a match for him. Ever since they were born in this world they had fought against many powerful forces and powerhouses, and they rarely lost. Only after our Fu clan joined in did this situation become more effective. We and the dragon slayer both suffered casualties. After going through many battles, in the end, we finally understood that the dragon slayer came to this world to kill the dragon race. However, the dragon race was very secretive. Before they could find the dragon race they first came into conflict with us, and then there was a series of battles. The dragon slayer was cruel by nature and killed the innocent. In order to prevent normal people from being killed we could only fight back. In the end I led my clan and after careful planning, we started a shocking battle with the dragon slayer. In the end we perished together and returned this world to a peaceful world. The Emperor of Heaven narrated the events of that year. After so many years with only a few words, it still gave people a feeling of shock and made their blood boil. Everyone's heart was tightly gripped as they stared at the Emperor of Heaven with burning eyes, filled with respect. You really are too great. Fang Shishir couldn't help but blurt out her praise. The Heavenly Emperor glanced at Fang Shishir indifferently and said, one must pay a price for greatness. My price was the sacrifice of the entire Fu clan, which is extremely painful. However, if I could do it again I would still do it. Although the price, the Emperor of the Dragon Slayer of Heaven. That's why you're so great. Fang Shishir said sincerely. The Emperor of Heaven's eyes were filled with gratification and pride. Father, in the end you survived, so you still won. The Empyrean fairy understood her father's actions and said with pride. Did I win? The Emperor of Heaven did not deny it. Recalling the scene of that year he shook his head and said, no, that year I died in battle. I do not know why, but the remnant of my soul was guided by a mysterious force and returned to Heaven's gate. After that, I slept for thousands of years. Today I was awakened by you all and recovered some of my power. Mysterious force, what is that? The Emperor of Heaven fell into deep thought. After a long time he said, I have been thinking about this problem for a long time. Now I finally have a clue. I am the Emperor of Heaven. I listen to the heavens and comprehend the heavenly Tao. Therefore, I believe that it was the heavenly Tao that guided me back to Heaven's gate. Of course, it is also because I still have concerns and obsessions in my heart. Obsessions, of course, were referring to his daughter who had always been in his heart. The Empyrean fairy had always been absorbing pure Yin energy in Heaven's gate. The Emperor of Heaven had always been concerned about this. Even after his death, the remnant of his soul did not forget about this. Then, under the guidance of the heavenly Tao, he returned to Heaven's gate. All of this was extremely mysterious. The people who heard it were shrouded in fog and were amazed. However, the Empyrean fairy did not feel that it was mysterious. This was because the Emperor of Heaven was originally an extremely mysterious existence. That was why others coveted and envied him. Boom. A loud sound came from behind the sacred armored shield, interrupting their conversation. They all turned their heads and looked at the sacred armored shield with different expressions. What's going on? What happened? Fang Shishir and Feng Xinyang said in unison. They revealed anxious expressions and rushed to the sacred armored shield. They were as anxious as ants on a hot pan, but they did not know what to do. Previously, Tang Zheng had repeatedly warned them not to rush in. They were deeply afraid that if they rushed in, it would be too late for regrets. The Empyrean fairy hurriedly looked at the Emperor of Heaven and asked, Father, the Emperor of Heaven's calm expression also disappeared and revealed suspicion and worry. He said resolutely, let's go in. What if we ruin their plans? What should we do? Feng Xinyang immediately expressed her worry. With my father here, nothing will happen. The Empyrean fairy was full of confidence. The others looked at each other and deeply looked at the Emperor of Heaven before retreating to the side. The Emperor of Heaven slowly walked in front of the sacred armored shield and patted it with his palm. Silently, the sacred armored shield flickered and quickly shrunk. In the end, it became the size of a palm and revealed the scene behind it. Everyone's eyes simultaneously focused on it. When they saw it clearly, they all revealed looks of shock. Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang were constantly absorbing the purine energy in the heavenly bed. Their bodies were rapidly accumulating purine energy. The pure yang energy in Tang Zheng's body was being neutralized and his cultivation was also slowly rising. The pure yin energy awakened Yi Dingdang's vitality and gave her a second spring. Moreover, the pure yin energy did not stop flowing into Yi Dingdang's body. It was accumulating bit by bit and the pure yin energy was increasing. Yi Dingdang's physique was also subtly changing. In the past she had a pure yin body. With the accumulation of pure yin energy, she suddenly soared to a profound yin body. This kind of qualitative leap also accompanied her cultivation by leaps and bounds. Although she was a martial artist, this kind of leap in level still brought great benefits to her skills and caused a qualitative change. Her inner strength was like a surging river as it flowed through her meridians. A rumbling sound rang out incessantly. Tang Zheng clearly discovered this point and was overjoyed. He knew that he had succeeded. The cultivation in his body had also undergone a qualitative leap. In the end, when the two of them tightly hugged each other and climbed to the peak, the pure yin energy quickly circulated between the two of them, reaching a wonderful state of harmony between yin and yang. Honk, honk. Two muffled sounds came from their bodies like thunder, and their bodies were covered with a layer of sparkling luster. Yi Dingdang's eyes also opened. She looked at Tang Zheng with great joy. Everything that happened just now was still fresh in her mind. It was as if she had come back to life. Her body felt completely different. My cultivation. She muttered to herself in shock. She was actually unable to express the joy in her heart. Your cultivation has soared to the great scholar realm. Congratulations. Tang Jing said with a smile. Yi Dingdang smiled like a flower and said, Thank you. I feel that you also seem to have changed. She had reached the great scholar realm. Whether it was her vision or feeling, they were all extraordinary. Naturally, she noticed the changes in Tang Zheng. Yes, I have reached the third grade of the divine transformation realm. This is all thanks to you. If I didn't save you, I wouldn't have had such a fortuitous encounter. Moreover, the most important thing is not the increase in my cultivation, but that I absorbed a large amount of pure yin energy and neutralized the pure yang energy. In a short period of time, my pure yang energy won't erupt again. Really? Yi Dingdang was well aware of the dangers of pure yang energy. Hearing this, she was wild with joy. She was even happier than if she had obtained benefits. Of course. Tang Jing hugged her tightly and kissed her forehead. This is all thanks to you. Yi Dingdang rolled her eyes at him. Her gaze fell on his bare and broad chest. Only then did she remember that she and he were not wearing any clothes. Moreover, they had just done that thing. In this unfamiliar environment with her parents and a group of acquaintances outside, it was really embarrassing. Yi Dingdang was always magnanimous, but this time she couldn't help but blush. She urged, Hurry up and put on your clothes. Yi, why are you wearing clothes? It's better to be naked like this. Tang Jing deliberately touched her chest and said mischievously, You're annoying. Yi Dingdang waved her fist and hit his chest like a spoiled child. Tang Jing's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He grabbed her fist and pulled her into his arms. Aya, what are you doing? Yi Dingdang was shocked. She didn't expect Tang Jing to be so daring. He even dared to mess around. Moreover, she had just experienced intense exercise. Her whole body was weak. Like a curve in autumn water, she fell into Tang Jing's arms. How could she be a match for him? The two of them quickly grappled with each other. Tang Jing didn't have any other intentions. He just wanted to tease her. Yi Dingdang's reaction was very intense. The two were both experts. They went back and forth and actually fought on the celestial bed. Punches and kicks flew, leaving behind afterimages. Bang! Suddenly, a fist landed on the celestial bed. A dent immediately appeared. Aya, you broke the celestial bed. Yi Dingdang cried out in alarm. Tang Jing also subconsciously stopped his movements. The celestial bed saved Yi Dingdang and was also a treasure of the gate of heaven. If he broke the celestial bed, he wouldn't be able to explain it to the Empyrean fairy. Traces of spiderweb-like patterns spread out from the dent. In an instant, the celestial bed became like a spiderweb. It was covered with fine lines. This change shocked the two. They looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do. The two had a premonition that the celestial bed was going to be destroyed. It's all your fault. Yi Dingdang glared at him coquettishly. Tang Jing was resentful. He didn't know how to answer. Before he could finish, there was a loud bang. The celestial bed collapsed. The two of them screamed as they rapidly plummeted to the ground in a freefall. Chapter 1233. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them and their eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. The place was empty and the bed had disappeared, leaving behind a huge black hole. No one knew what was inside. The Empyrean fairy's eyes widened and she exclaimed as if she had seen a ghost, "What's going on?" The bed was the core of the gate of heaven and it had saved her life before. It had a special meaning to her. "Where are they?" Feng Shishir also exclaimed. "They must be inside the hole." Everyone stared at the black hole. The Emperor of Heaven's eyes shone as he stared at the black hole and muttered, "Could this be their opportunity?" "What do you mean?" The Empyrean fairy noticed her father's strange behavior and quickly asked. The Emperor of Heaven walked step by step to the edge of the black hole and looked inside. It was pitch black and he couldn't see what was inside. "There's something else under the bed. I'm the only one who knows about this. I didn't expect them to accidentally fall in." The Emperor of Heaven said meaningfully. "I don't know either." The Empyrean fairy was very surprised. "That's right. Back then, in order to save you, I traveled thousands of mountains and rivers, racked my brains and finally found the gate of heaven, and then found the heavenly bed. In the end, I opened up a space under the bed and hid the secret of the Fu family." The Emperor of Heaven stared at the black hole and recounted as he recalled. The Empyrean fairy was shocked and she frowned and asked impatiently, "Could it be the heavenly book?" This was the biggest secret of the Fu family. The others had also heard that the Emperor of Heaven's secret was hidden in the gate of heaven. It was probably true. She was wrong to think that there was no secret. "Yes." The Emperor of Heaven admitted and pointed at the black hole. "It's down there." Everyone's interest was piqued. Although they didn't covet the heavenly book, it would be a great honor to see it in person. Seeing that everyone was staring at the black hole, the Emperor of Heaven said, "They've been down there for so long. I'm afraid they're quite frightened. Let's go down." Then before anyone could react, he flew into the black hole. The Empyrean fairy didn't want to be left behind and flew down with the Emperor of Heaven. The others looked at each other. The Emperor of Heaven didn't stop them. Could it be that he agreed that they could go down too? "You guys go down, I'll watch from above and accompany the heavenly thunder." Feng Xinyang took the initiative and said, looking at her husband beside her. Yi Tunlei was heavily injured and had just returned from the gates of hell, so it was not good for him to be jolted. "Be careful." Feng Shishir and Yan Luyun impatiently flew down. It was just that the two of them were unable to be as calm as the heavenly emperor and the nine heavens profound maiden, as if they were strolling in the courtyard. The black hole seemed to have a magical power. After they jumped in, they were quickly sucked in and fell into the depths. The black hole seemed to have no end. It was pitch black and they couldn't see the end of it. Only the surrounding darkness and dead silence added a sense of oppression. When Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang landed, they also had this feeling, but his cultivation was after all extraordinary, so he quickly calmed down and activated the true fire to appear from his fingers, illuminating the surroundings. The black hole was pitch black and seemed to be able to absorb light. The real fire's light couldn't penetrate it. Therefore, the real fire only lit up the path ahead and had no other use. After Yi Dingdang got over the initial panic, she quickly grabbed the clothes that fell beside her and urged, "Quickly put on your clothes." Tang Jing also realized that since there was such a place under the heavenly gate, he couldn't rule out the possibility that there were others. Therefore it was better not to be naked. Otherwise it wouldn't be worth it to suffer a loss. The two of them put on their clothes in mid-air and calmly landed. When their feet landed on solid ground, they both breathed a sigh of relief. However, their curiosity was aroused again. They opened their eyes wide as if they wanted to see every detail. "Ah, there's someone," Yi Dingdang exclaimed. She quickly covered her mouth and pointed at a blurry figure in the distance. Tang Zheng's pupils shrank. He also locked onto the figure. Although it wasn't too far away, the figure was somewhat blurry. It gave people an ethereal feeling and was unfathomable. It might be an expert. "Be careful," Tang Zheng warned again and again. He pulled Yi Dingdang and carefully walked over. This was the heavenly gate. Everything was mysterious. They couldn't be careless. He couldn't help but regret. When he first landed, he should have flown out and told the Empyrean fairy. Perhaps she would know what was going on. Didn't the outside world always say that the heavenly gate hid a huge secret? Could it be here? The Empyrean fairy had repeatedly denied it. Could it be that she didn't want others to know? As a normal person, they all had a strong desire to spy on others. Tang Jing was a normal person. Naturally, he was no exception. Therefore, he prepared to investigate thoroughly. If it really was a secret of the Fu clan, then he wouldn't reveal it to the outside world. After all, he had a close relationship with Fu Yao. How could he trick her? Looking at the figure, he muttered in his heart. Who could this person be? Was it someone from the Fu clan? But the heavenly gate was so secretive. This bed had been sealing this black hole. Especially with the flood dragon from before. If there was someone here, then they must have lived here for a long time. Perhaps thousands of years. Thinking of this, he was anxious. This person must be an expert. With so many experts gathered, it was too much for the eye to take in. What kind of expert would appear in the Fu clan? Let's wait and see. Yi Dingdang subconsciously held Tang Zheng's hand tightly. At this crucial moment, Tang Zheng was her support. This was a choice that she couldn't help but make. The two cautiously approached the back of the figure. The figure didn't seem to notice them and remained motionless. This person was about the same height as Tang Zheng. He was taller, with a feather fan and a silk headband. He wore a green gown, the standard attire of an ancient person. Tang Zheng coincidentally stopped in his tracks and looked at each other. He couldn't figure out the situation of the other party. Yi Dingdang touched Tang Zheng's arm. Tang Zheng understood and cupped his hands in greeting. He then said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, Junior Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang accidentally entered this place. If we have offended you in any way, please forgive us. His voice was full of energy and did not lose its dignity. The surroundings were silent. The other party didn't answer him and didn't move at all. It was as if he was deaf. The two of them looked at each other. They didn't understand the deeper meaning behind this, but they weren't people who would sit still and wait for death. They tacitly took 2 steps forward and circled around from the side. They looked up and saw the person clearly at a close distance. Not a person? Tang Zheng's jaw almost dropped. When he looked at the person face to face, although the other party was lifelike and not much different from a real person, he could still tell at a glance. This wasn't a living person. Or rather, it wasn't a real person but a statue. A statue that was so lifelike that it could be mistaken for a real person. The two of them heaved a sigh of relief. It would be great if it was a statue. It was better than encountering an expert from thousands of years ago. Tang Zheng had already encountered many such experts. Most of them had surly personalities and were difficult to figure out. If he were to encounter such a person in the gate of heaven, it would be difficult to predict good or bad luck. Especially since he had Yi Dingdang by his side, he had to take precautions. The two of them stared at the statue intently. The statue had one hand behind his back and the other hand was holding a scroll. He had a dignified appearance with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He didn't show any anger, but he gave off an invisible pressure. Even if it was just a statue, if an ordinary person looked at it, their breathing would definitely become heavy. If a statue had this kind of magical power, one could imagine how powerful the real person was. Who could he be? Yi Dingdang felt the same and asked curiously. Tang Zheng shook his head and muttered, I don't know, but he's definitely not an ordinary person. Yi Dingdang nodded in agreement. If Fu Yao comes down, we might be able to find out his identity. This statue is a bit strange. Yi Dingdang said as she stared at the statue in surprise. What's strange? Tang Zheng didn't understand. Yi Dingdang pointed at the scroll in the statue's hand and said, Look, the rest of the statue is made of stone. Only that scroll looks like a real book. After her reminder, Tang Zheng suddenly opened his eyes wide and focused his gaze on the scroll. As expected, it was a real scroll. Could it be that there was something wrong with this scroll? There was definitely something wrong with this abnormal situation. Tang Zheng had discovered it, so of course he had to get to the bottom of it. Senior, please excuse me. Tang Zheng cupped his hand slightly. Although the other party was a statue, he didn't have the slightest disrespect in his heart. He reached out his hand, wanting to take the scroll and see what was inside. However, just as his hand was about to touch the scroll, a mysterious power surged out from the scroll. Whoosh! The mysterious power rippled out in all directions, causing the air to resonate with it. It was as if there were fluctuations in their brains, and a sharp pain instantly invaded their brains. The two of them couldn't help but hug their brains as they cried out in pain. My head hurts. Yi Dingdang's facial muscles twisted in pain. Although Tang Zheng also had a splitting headache, he still hugged Yi Dingdang and comforted her. Dingdang, with me here, nothing will happen to you. This mysterious power was attacking his brain, so he couldn't resist at all. Or rather, he didn't know how to resist. Hurry and make this thing stop. Yi Dingdang bent down and urged him. Tang Jing's eyes trembled as he fiercely stared at the scroll and said, "I don't believe that I am not a match for a statue like you." He became ruthless as he activated his internal energy. A cold light shot out from his hand and flew towards the statue. No matter how the other party attacked, attacking the statue first was always the right thing to do. However, the attack suddenly stopped, like a clay ox entering the sea. It didn't cause any waves at all. Another wave of intense pain attacked his brain. He also couldn't help but cry out in pain. To be able to make him cry out in pain, it could be seen how powerful this attack was. Yi Dingdang felt as if her head was about to explode. She cried out in pain, "Hurry and stop. I feel like I'm going to die." Seeing Yi Dingdang in pain, Tang Jing felt as if a knife was being twisted. He used all of his strength to activate the ancient Clear Heaven scroll and roared, "I'll fight you to the death." Chapter 1234. Tang Jing activated the ancient Clear Heaven scroll. His true qi surged out like a torrential river, instantly pulsing out from his 8 extraordinary meridians. Boom. The true qi transformed into a majestic energy that collided with the mysterious force. The scroll emitted a strange light that clashed with the true qi. Tang Jing spat out a mouthful of blood that landed on the scroll. The light was immediately tinged with a hint of demonic red. The red light was like a sharp knife that landed in Tang Jing's eyes. It was as if it wanted to cut open his pupils. "Ah!" He screamed in pain and closed his eyes. The pain was unbearable, but he did not let go of Yi Dingdong's hand. Even if he died, he would not let go. The mysterious force completely enveloped him. He could not move at all. It was as if he had turned into a mummy. "Brat, what did you provoke this time? Do you want me to be buried here with you?" The inner demon's voice sounded. It was flustered and exasperated. Earlier he had been observing the scene. He had seen many things, but he had never seen anything like this. This was not strange. He was a powerhouse from ancient times. At that time, the Emperor of Heaven had not yet appeared, and the Fu clan had not yet risen. Naturally, he did not take them seriously. Moreover, this space was created by the Emperor of Heaven. What was inside? Perhaps only the Emperor of Heaven knew. The inner demons was also very curious. He did not stop Tang Jing in time. Especially that scroll, it felt very mysterious. He could not see through it. This piqued his interest. However, he did not expect that the power of this scroll would be so strong that it would actually force Tang Jing into a desperate situation, causing him to fall into a predicament as well. "Is this my fault? If you can stop all of this." Tang Jing retorted angrily. Of course, the inner demons had no way to fight back. They could only watch all of this happen, hoping for a miracle that would allow them to escape. Suddenly, a ray of light flickered in Tang Jing's mind. This ray of light grew stronger and stronger. Finally, it soared into the sky from the top of his head, illuminating this space. "What is this?" the inner demons exclaimed. Tang Jing's head trembled, but he discovered that it was actually the ancient Clear Heaven Scroll's transformation. Ever since the ancient Clear Heaven Scroll entered his brain, it had been quietly lying there without much change. But just a moment ago, the ancient Clear Heaven Scroll shone with a blazing light like the sun. He immediately realized that there might be a turning point. In the blink of an eye, the light broke through his brain as if it was going to rush up to the 9 heavens. The pain in his brain and eyes immediately lessened, and his entire body and mind relaxed. Joy blossomed in his eyes. Could it be that there was really a turning point? Before he could react, the words on the ancient Clear Heaven scroll fluttered and flew out from his brain, surrounding his body to form a blazing light. It was like a layer of light coat firmly protecting him. He was stunned and did not know what adjectives to use to describe it. His brain had lost the ability to think. But the next scene made his jaw almost drop to the ground. The light from the book in the hands of the statue also unexpectedly appeared one by one large words, which complemented the words on the ancient Clear Heaven scroll, forming a strange picture. Yi Dingdong's painful screams had unknowingly disappeared. Her eyes were wide open and she looked at this scene in disbelief. The inner demons also looked at this scene, not knowing what was going on. Tang Jing also had a stomach full of questions, but he did not have to die. This was undoubtedly a good thing, so he did not deliberately stop all of this, but let nature take its course. What are you doing?" Suddenly, a cry of alarm interrupted Tang Jing's thoughts. As far as the eye could see, Yan Qingyi's eyes were wide open, staring straight at him. Her expression was quite unfriendly, and it was as if she had changed into a different person. Tang Jing smacked his lips, and before he could say a word, the other party had already rushed in front of him like a whirlwind. Her speed was so fast that it made people speechless. When did Yan Qingyi become so powerful? Tang Jing only had time to ask this question in his mind, and then he saw the other party's hand patting him. He staggered back and the light completely disappeared. The light from the book in the hands of the statue also disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Tang Jing was shocked and angry, and just as he was about to ask what was going on, he saw the Empyrean fairy chasing after him, and respectfully standing beside Yan Qingyi. "What are you doing?" the Emperor of Heaven asked with an unfriendly expression. That scene really gave him a fright and gave him an ominous premonition. But in reality he also didn't figure out what was going on. Tang Jing's two eyes fiercely stared at Yan Qingyi and said, "What are you doing now? You almost killed me." Fortunately, he didn't do it at the critical moment, otherwise he would have been directly crippled by Yan Qingyi's palm. The Emperor of Heaven didn't care so much and pressed on step by step. His attitude of wanting to condemn him was obvious. The Empyrean fairy was shocked and quickly stood between the two and advised, "Father, calm down. What did Tang Jing do wrong?" "He is Tang Jing." The Emperor of Heaven stared at Tang Jing. "I never changed my name. I am Tang Jing, so what?" Tang Jing raised his head and stared back at the Emperor of Heaven without fear. "Wait a minute." Tang Jing's mind flashed, and he remembered how the Empyrean fairy addressed the Emperor of Heaven. His eyes almost fell out of their sockets and he asked in a panic, "What did you just call her?" What was the Empyrean fairy's identity? She actually called him father, and all of this was strange. Wasn't she Yan Qingyi? "This is my father, his soul is in Yan Qingyi's body." The Empyrean fairy was afraid that Tang Jing didn't know the details and would have a conflict with her father, so she explained clearly in a few words. "Your father's soul? The legendary Emperor of Heaven?" Tang Jing's expression changed dramatically. He had only heard a little about the Emperor of Heaven's illustrious reputation, but it resounded like thunder in his ears. He knew that the other party was a peerless expert. Although he had seen many experts such as Qiyu, the Yellow Emperor, and the Inner Demons, he still couldn't help but feel his emotions fluctuate when he saw a legendary figure face to face. "Yes." The Empyrean fairy nodded heavily, and she shot a glance at Tang Jing, telling him not to anger her father. Tang Jing sucked in a breath of cold air, and he stared fixedly at Yan Qingyi. He mustered up his courage and said, "Senior, I have no enmity with you, so why are you attacking me?" The Empyrean fairy's heart was in her throat when she heard this, and she looked helplessly at Tang Jing. He dared to question the Emperor of Heaven face to face, and she had to admit that he was foolish and bold. Tang Jing's courage was indeed great. He was in the right, and even if the other party was the Emperor of Heaven, he still needed to ask clearly. This was his responsibility to himself. The Emperor of Heaven raised his eyebrows and looked at Tang Jing in astonishment, as if he hadn't expected that he would dare to question him. Wasn't this the same as eating a leopard's guts? The Emperor of Heaven didn't immediately fly into a rage. His eyes were like a scanner, sizing up Tang Jing from head to toe, as if he wanted to see through him. "I attacked you because of what you did. What did you do just now?" "That book attacked me and almost killed me in Ding Dang. Don't tell me I'm just going to sit there and wait to be captured?" Tang Jing's words were mixed with a lot of gunpowder. "If you want to take it away, of course you will be attacked. Do you think that good things in the world are so easy to obtain?" the Emperor of Heaven asked in a mocking tone. Tang Jing's head moved. He had learned from the Emperor of Heaven that the book wasn't simple, which meant that it wasn't ordinary. "It's just a book. How useful can it be?" Tang Jing deliberately retorted. The Empyrean fairy's eyes were also unconsciously attracted by the book. She stared straight at it and then looked at the statue, muttering in her heart, "I've been lying on the bed for so many years, but I didn't know that there was a different world under the bed. There's actually a statue and a mysterious book." Book. Her heart shook as a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. She was startled and her eyes went round as if she wanted to see the nature of the book. The book emitted a layer of light that made it impossible for her to see what was real and what was fake. When the Emperor of Heaven heard this, he snorted and said, "You think that it's just a book and doesn't have much use? Haha, short-sighted rat, how dare you say such arrogant words?" Tang Jing really couldn't figure out the truth of the book and asked, "Then what kind of book do you think it is?" Listen carefully. That is the heavenly book that countless people yearn for even in their dreams." The celestial emperor's voice resonated as his eyes lit up. Heavenly book? When he said this, Tang Jing didn't feel much. After all, this was the first time he heard of the existence of the heavenly book. He didn't know what it was used for. The Empyrean fairy covered her mouth with her small hand and stared straight at the heavenly book. There was only one thought in her mind. So this is the heavenly book. The others were right. The gate of heaven hid the Fu clan's biggest secret. No wonder people said that if one could see through this secret, then one could become the next emperor of heaven. In fact, this sentence meant that once one obtained the heavenly book and learned to cultivate it, then one could become the next emperor of heaven. This was a huge temptation. No wonder so many people wanted to enter the gate of heaven. Ji Wuxiang gave his all to enter the gate of heaven. Seeing that Tang Zheng's eyes were dark and unmoved, the emperor of heaven felt like playing the lute to a cow. He said, "You want to take the heavenly book, but let me tell you, even if you get the heavenly book, you won't be able to understand it." Back then, when facing the huge threat of the dragon slayers, the emperor of heaven placed the heavenly book in the gate of heaven so that it could be passed down continuously. He hoped that his daughter would discover the mystery of the gate of heaven and obtain the heavenly book to inherit his will. As for whether the Empyrean fairy could learn to understand the heavenly book, he actually didn't have full confidence. The heavenly book's mysteries were beyond imagination. Normal people couldn't understand it at all. Even if it was the Empyrean fairy, the emperor of heaven didn't have full confidence. Back then, it was also because of the guidance of the previous generation's celestial emperor that he was able to comprehend the heavenly book's Xianji and learn the supreme divine power. Tang Zheng heard this sentence, but he didn't think so. Back then, Tian Chanzi also said that the ancient scroll of heaven was very profound. In the end, he found that the way to read it was wrong. These ancient people's divine power was not small, but there were many limitations. Their words may not be credible. "I'm not illiterate, how can I not understand a book?" Tang Zheng refuted. The emperor of heaven laughed, "You're boasting shamelessly. Since that's the case, I'll let you broaden your horizons." As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed his finger and the heavenly book flew from the statue. Today I'll be updating 2 chapters. This is the first chapter. Welcome to my WeChat official account. Tang Xiao. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.